These are real horror stories, disturbing, mysterious, and true. Each tale will send chills down your spine as you slowly drift into sleep. This story is completely free. We don't run any ads, which means we earn nothing from these videos. All we ask is one small favor. Please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. It costs you nothing, but it gives us the motivation to keep creating more real horror stories every night. Also, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is right now. We love reading your messages. Now, let's begin the story. Story number 1. Evan had always liked the sound of machines at night. Most people heard a computer's fan as background noise, the low whir of a tired processor keeping itself alive. Evan liked to sit in the dark and listen to it, imagining the little currents of electricity flicking through circuits like invisible fireflies. It made him feel less alone in his tiny off-campus apartment, a single cramped room on the 3rd floor, with thin walls and a crooked window that let in the orange wash of the street lamp outside. He stayed up late during the week, then later on weekends, wandering through parts of the internet that were more rumor than map. He used the tools he had learned in his computer science classes, along with a few he hadn't mentioned to any professor, and slipped through layers of hidden sites and half-functioning message boards. Most of it was dull. Abandoned marketplaces, broken links, forums full of people talking big and doing nothing. He liked it anyway. It made the world feel bigger than lectures and cheap coffee. One night in early autumn, when the air through the window felt thin and cold, Evan found a post on a nearly empty board. There were no ads, no profile pictures, just a simple black background and a list of threads with dates stretching back years. All of them had died out except one, bumped to the top just an hour earlier. The title was, "The Listener Node," for those who can't stand the silence. Evan clicked. The thread was short. A few anonymous users mentioned a link that only worked late at night, and only for people who were alone. The responses were scattered over months, sometimes years. The earliest post simply said, "Stayed on till sunrise. Never heard my room the same way again." The next one, "Don't do it with the lights off. Trust this." A newer reply from 3 weeks ago. "It's still there. Quieter now. But it knows my building." Beneath those comments was a single line of text, not even clickable. Just a string of characters and dots that obviously belonged to the other side of the internet. Evan copied it, opened the masked browser he kept tucked away on his desktop, and pasted the address. The page loaded into darkness. For a long moment, it looked as if nothing was there. Then slow, pale text faded onto the screen, as if written by a hesitant hand. "The listener node." Beneath it, a single instruction. "Allow microphone. Do not speak. Do not disconnect until sunrise." Under that, there was a tiny counter. "Current listeners. Tries." Evan leaned back in his chair. It had to be some sort of art project, he thought. Maybe an experimental soundscape, or a social experiment to see how long people would sit in silence. A joke for insomniacs with more curiosity than sense. He hovered over the prompt to allow his microphone, then clicked, "Accept." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint hiss began in his headphones. Not loud, not threatening. Just soft. Steady. Static. Like the sound between stations on a weak radio. Underneath it, barely audible, were hints of something else. A rustle, the creak of wood, a distant car passing somewhere that was not his street. Evan glanced at the counter again. "Current listeners. Kate." He wasn't imagining it. Somewhere out there, 3 other people were sitting in dark rooms, headphones on, listening to the same thin, shared river of sound. It was oddly comforting, like a late-night study hall where no one talked, but everyone stayed awake together. He sat like that for nearly an hour. Now and then, the static dipped, and a soft sound glided past. A faucet turning off. A door closing. A chair scraping. The noises came from no obvious direction, and none of them were sharp or alarming. He found himself relaxing, leaning his head back, eyes half shut, when his roommate Desmond stumbled in around 2 in the morning, the door swinging open with a thud. Evan quickly yanked his headphones down around his neck and switched to another window. The listener node stayed open in the background, the counter now at 2, as if someone else had just disconnected. "Still coding?" Desmond muttered, "Half asleep already." Evan shrugged. "Something like that. He didn't mention the page." It felt like something that might disappear if he said it out loud. The next night, curiosity pulled him back. He waited until Desmond left, until the hallway fell quiet and the leftover noise of day thinned to almost nothing. Then he opened the black-windowed browser, pasted the address from memory, and watched the words appear again. Allow microphone. Do not speak. Do not disconnect until sunrise. He clicked, accept. The hiss returned, familiar now. Current listeners, 1. This time the sounds came sooner, a faint ticking like an old clock, the low hum of something mechanical, and strangely, a soft papery flutter, like pages being turned. Evan frowned, looking around his room. His own desk was messy, but still, the only movement coming from the subtle sway of a poster above his bed in the slight draft. He snapped his fingers once, near the microphone. Nothing changed. Good, he thought. So the page really was just a shared feed, pulling in random audio from somewhere else. Maybe a series of microphones in different empty rooms, rotated in and out. He could imagine the listener node as some nameless sound artist's final project, quietly looping for anyone strange enough to find it. On the third night, he decided to test it properly. He clicked accept as usual. The static entered his ears, that gentle washing noise. He waited a few minutes, letting the soft, cluttered background fill the quiet. Then he picked up a pen from his desk and tapped the wooden surface 3 times, slow and even. Tap, tap, tap. He listened. At first, nothing happened. The hiss grew a little louder, then settled. A distant electronic tone chimed. Far away from his room, Evan was about to lean back, satisfied that this was all just abstract sound when he heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The same 3 knocks, but duller, as if answered from the other side of a wall. They were delayed just enough to feel wrong, off by a strange heartbeat. They did not sound like his desk. They sounded like someone else repeating the experiment in an almost empty room. He swallowed. Coincidence, he told himself. There were other listeners. Someone else could have had the same idea. He tested again. This time, he dragged his chair an inch closer to the desk. The legs made a short, complaining squeak on the uneven floor. He waited. Static. A soft shuffle. Something that might have been a cough. His own breathing. Soft inside the warm oval of his headphones. Then faintly, squeak, as if another chair moved across another floor. That night, he stayed longer. Every small sound in his room felt like a question the node might answer. When he shifted his weight, he imagined someone else doing the same. Sometimes the replies came immediately. Sometimes not at all. Sometimes he would hear something with no clear source in his own room. A muted thud. A slow metallic clink. A door hinge somewhere. Eventually, he fell asleep at his desk, cheek pressed to the back of his hand, the computer's glow the only light in the room. The next morning, he woke to a stiff neck and the stale scent of overused air. The browser window had crashed at some point, an error message hovering over the black. He shook it off as a weird late-night obsession and told himself he wouldn't open it again. He lasted 2 nights. On the third, he woke near midnight for no good reason, the room too quiet, the street lamp outside flickering. The silence felt heavier somehow, as if the walls were listening back. Without thinking too hard, he sat down, woke the computer, and let the node crawl back onto his screen. Current listeners, 0. Then, a blink later, current listeners, 1. The static flowed into his ears, smoother than he remembered. For a long stretch, nothing rose above it. No doors, no chairs, no distant water. Just the sound of almost silence, filling in the gaps. And then Evan heard his own room. It started with something small, the low hum of his mini fridge, coming in just a fraction of a second after his brain recognized it in reality. Then the soft rattle of the loose window pane when a gust of night wind pushed against the glass. He heard the sound outside the headphones, then again inside them, just slightly quieter, slightly delayed. He took a breath and realized that too had a faint echo in his ears. Half a heartbeat later, he pulled one ear cup off to check. The fridge still hummed. The window still rattled. But through the single covered ear, he could hear them again, as if someone was playing his night back to him a second after it happened. He checked his settings, tabbed out of the hidden browser, opened his system's audio control panel. His microphone input was being used by the node, but there was no sign of any playback loop that should have been feeding his own sounds back to him. The configuration was wrong for that, he knew it. He had set it up himself. Still, the echo continued. He tapped his desk once, Tap, tap. The second one did not come from his own hand. The node's page flickered. For the first time since he had found it, new text scrolled gently down the screen, as if surfaced from where it had been hiding all along. Local environment. Syncing. Coordinates appeared. They were generalized, not precise, but close enough to make his throat tighten. The right city. The right part of town. A radius that, when he pictured it on a map, wrapped around his building in a loose circle. Evan's mouse hand trembled. He reached up to close the window. Before he could click, another line appeared. Do not disconnect before sunrise. The instruction pulsed softly. Not a threat, not in capital letters, just a quiet, persistent suggestion. He sat frozen. It was an absurd feeling. This was just a page. Just code and design. Yet the thought of defying those pale letters made his stomach twist. He looked at the clock in the corner of his screen. 1:47 a.m. 5 long hours until sunrise. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that he could shut the lid of his laptop and everything of this would vanish. At the same time, the echo of his breathing in his headphones grew clearer, like listening to himself from the other side of a closed door. He decided to test one last thing. He pushed his chair back and stood up, letting the headphones rest on the desk, still connected. He walked slowly to the other side of the room, where his narrow bed waited under the crooked window. He didn't make any loud noises. He didn't speak. He simply moved, breathing, the way a person does in familiar space. From the desk, the headphones rustled faintly. Then, a moment later, from inside them came the small, distant sound of chair legs turning on old wood. Footsteps. A soft exhale. Almost, but not quite, matching his. It felt like listening to a recording of himself made a minute earlier, except he hadn't left his desk until just now. For the first time, Evan felt a thin line of fear trace its way up his spine. Not panic, not yet. Just the knowledge that something he thought he understood had slipped out of its shape, the way a shadow can look like a person until it doesn't. He went back to the desk, and with deliberate care, closed the browser. The sound did not stop. The headphones still whispered in the empty air, the faint hiss curling out from their padded cups. He yanked the cord from the laptop. The noise dimmed, but did not completely vanish, like a memory of static rasping at the edges of hearing. He left them there on the desk and went to bed, staring at the ceiling until the first hints of gray crept through the window. Every time the building creaked or a car rolled by outside, he thought he could hear the same sound a second later, softer, somewhere just out of sight. The next day at class, he tried to laugh about it to himself. Sleep deprivation. Stress. A brain that had spent too many hours in front of too many screens. He did not mention the listener node to anyone. It already seemed too fragile and strange to survive being spoken aloud. He told himself he was done with it. But curiosity is a quiet thing. It does not shout. It waits. A week later, on a rainy night when Desmond was staying over at a friend's place, Evan came home to a darker apartment than usual. A faint buzzing sound met him as he opened the door, like an old television left on in another room. He followed it to his desk. The laptop was shut. The headphones were where he had left them. But the tiny power light on the USB interface he used for audio was glowing a steady, watchful green. The buzzing grew louder as he approached, forming itself into the now familiar soft static. He hadn't turned anything on. He slid into his chair and slowly, carefully, opened the laptop. The screen woke in a wash of dim blue. No browser windows were open. No hidden tabs lurked at the edge of his vision. Everything looked ordinary, but the sound continued, humming through the headphones. He clicked through his running processes, scanning line after line of names. Near the bottom, half obscured, was an entry labeled simply, Listener, EXE. His finger hovered over the trackpad. Before he could do anything, the sound in his headphones shifted. The static thinned, and threading through it came a gentle, familiar noise. His own door, closing. From the hallway, on the screen, a small, dark box appeared near the edge of his desktop. No border, no title. Inside, one line of text. New listener registered. Bedroom. Below it, a second line, slowly updating, as if filling itself in. Status, always on. Evan sat there in silence, heart beating too fast, breathing carefully so as not to disturb anything. In his ears, The node played the soft ambient sounds of his apartment, but not quite live, not quite past, somewhere between. A soft knock came at a door, muffled, not loud. It was impossible to tell if it came from the headphones or the hallway outside his room. He did not move. The screen dimmed after a while, slipping toward sleep mode, but the little dark box stayed, letters sharp. He reached out finally and pressed the power button until the laptop dropped into black. The sound went with it. Only the real quiet of his room remained, filled with the tiny noises buildings make when they think no one is listening. That night, Evan slept without any devices on. No laptop, no phone by his bed, no headphones, only the soft whisper of rain against the glass. Sometime before dawn, he woke to a faint, rhythmic noise. Not loud, not threatening, just someone, somewhere, tapping 3 times in a patient, steady pattern. Tap, tap, tap. It took him a moment to realize the sound was not in the room at all. It was inside the quiet that followed, as if the silence itself had learned to answer. The next day, Desmond mentioned offhand that he had started hearing things at night through the wall. Like what? Evan asked too quickly. Like, I don't know, Desmond said, frowning. Like an old recording of this place. Same creaks and stuff, but off. Almost like listening to our room on a delay. It's probably nothing. Pipes or something. He shrugged it away. Evan nodded and said nothing. When he opened his laptop later, in the bright safety of the afternoon, there was no sign of the listener node. The address he had memorized led nowhere, timing out into a bland error. The weird process was gone. His microphone settings were back to normal. Only one new file lay in a forgotten corner of his drive, date stamped the night the buzzing had returned. It was empty when he clicked it open. No text, no data, just a blank white field with a small, flickering cursor in the upper left corner. The file's name was simple. Listener, log, bedroom, txt. He closed it without typing a word. In the weeks that followed, Evan stopped exploring the deep web. He avoided empty forums and late-night threads. He went to bed earlier. Tried to, at least. But in the moments before sleep, when the building held its breath and the world felt paused, he sometimes had the strange, ticklish sense that somewhere, out there in the long corridors of the hidden internet, a counter still ticked upward. Current listeners on, and somewhere just beyond hearing, the silence on the other end of that connection was listening back. Story number 2. Mira first heard about the site in a half-forgotten thread, buried 3 levels deep in a forum that rarely saw new posts anymore. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of slow, gray evening that made her small apartment feel even smaller. Rain knocked softly at the window above her desk. The glow of the monitor washed her hands in pale light as she scrolled, one eye on the clock at the corner of the screen. She was supposed to be working on her resume. Instead, she was searching for ways to disappear. Not entirely, of course. She still needed a job, still needed a life, but she wanted her name cleared of old fragments that clung like cobwebs to forgotten corners of the internet. An angry comment made at 17, an awkward photo from a college party, a blog she had abandoned but never deleted. Little things, but they bothered her. They felt like a trail she had no control over, leading anyone with curiosity into parts of her past that no longer fit. She had already gone through the normal methods requesting removals, changing settings, pruning accounts, but there were always copies, caches, archived pages that refused to die. So she kept digging, following whispered suggestions from anonymous strangers. That was how she found the name. Vanishing point. Not SEO, not PR, just erasure. The phrase appeared in a post from 6 years ago, in a thread about cleaning up digital footprints. The original poster was long and active. Most replies were skeptical. A few were too enthusiastic. One, written 3 months earlier by someone who had never written anything else on the forum, simply said, "They work. Maybe too well. Don't give them everything." Beneath that, an address. Not a normal web address, but one that lived behind layers of routing and obfuscation. The kind of thing Mira knew she should ignore. She stared at it anyway. Outside, a car swept past, its headlights sliding briefly across her ceiling. Her inbox in another tab sat open on a polite rejection from yet another job. Talking about fit and optics and online presence. Her cursor blinked over the strange string of characters waiting. She opened the other browser. The one she hadn't used since college. The one that leaned on a network of strangers. to wrap her connection in other people's shadows. The page took a long time to load. At first, it looked disappointingly simple. A white background, a thin gray border, text in an ordinary font. Welcome to Vanishing Point. Beneath it, in smaller letters, we specialize in total digital reduction. We do not optimize. We do not polish. We remove. There was no logo, no graphics, no contact address. Just a single button at the bottom. Begin intake. Mira sat back in her chair. It could easily be a scam, a data harvesting scheme pretending to clean up what it actually collected. But the forum thread had been old. The tone of the comments didn't sound like marketing. She thought of the HR person who had looked at her search results during a video call, her polite smile dimming just a fraction as she scrolled through the list of Mira's old usernames. She clicked, Begin Intake. The page refreshed to reveal a short questionnaire. What do you want removed? Below, a large empty box and a blinking cursor. Mira typed cautiously at first. Old social media posts under my real name, outdated profiles, cached blog entries. She hesitated, then added, anything that could harm professional perception. The cursor blinked once, twice. New text appeared beneath her response. We can do that. Warning. Our methods are irreversible. Do you consent to permanent digital reduction associated with the name Mira Alvarez? Her full name, typed correctly, even though she hadn't entered it yet. Mira frowned. She checked her connection, her settings. Location services were off. Her browser was tunneled. Her account on this machine didn't even use her full name. The page remained patiently still. She told herself there were ways to guess. A username reused somewhere. A cookie she had missed. A bit of metadata leaking through. Nothing supernatural, just invasive, the way most things online quietly were. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Yes, she wrote. And then after a moment, what exactly do you do? The reply was immediate. We remove you from indices, archives, and mirrors. We bury references, dissolve cached shadows, thin connections. We make you less visible. We cannot tell you how. A line appeared below. If you understand and agree, type, I consent to reduction. She knew rationally that she should close the tab, that any site that vague about its process should not be trusted. But the thought of finally shutting off the little channels that carried pieces of her younger self out into the world was intoxicating. She typed, I consent to reduction. The page went blank, then slowly filled with a progress bar, the kind used on download screens. No percent. Just a thin gray line that began to creep from left to right. Beneath it, initial sweep in progress. Please remain connected. She waited. After a few minutes, the bar reached a small, shallow notch labeled Stage 1, Public Search. Her email client pinged quietly in the background. She alt-tabbed and watched as a message from a search engine she had used for years arrived in her inbox. Unusual activity for your name has been detected. If this is you, no action is necessary. She flipped back to the Vanishing Point tab. The bar quivered, then inched forward. Another ping. This time from an old networking site she barely remembered joining. Your profile has been flagged for removal due to a third-party request. Click here to dispute. She didn't click. She watched. On the Vanishing Point page, a line of text appeared under the progress bar. Surface instances. 118. Pending reduction. 63. Immediate erasures. 55. It felt unreal, like watching a game. Numbers ticking up and down. The bar moving so slowly she could barely see it, yet definitely moving. After half an hour, it stopped at the first notch. New text blinked into existence. Stage 1 complete. You are now 37% less visible in common search structures. Do you wish to continue to deeper levels? Y divided by N. Mira chewed her thumb. She opened a new tab and typed her own name. The results were thinner than before. Blogs she remembered were gone, returning soft error pages or generic front doors. Her old comment on a news article had vanished, replaced by a standard note about content unavailable. A social media argument from years ago no longer showed up in text form. Only faint references to a conversation someone else had archived, her name mentioned without context. It could all be coincidence. The slow drift of time on a restless internet. but the timing felt too neat. She went back to the vanishing point page. She typed, "Why?" The next stage loaded with a quieter animation. Stage 2, legacy mirrors, caches, and backups. Another warning appeared, softer this time. This may affect content others have saved or shared. Some memories are stored externally. Some will thin around you. Her stomach tightened at that phrase. Still, she watched the bar crawl forward. That night, she dreamed of old versions of herself wandering through empty web pages, their footprints fading behind them as they moved. In the morning, she almost forgot about it. Work at the small marketing firm where she freelanced was busy. Meetings blurred into emails. Emails blurred into drafts. The hum of the office air conditioner and the dull tap of keys all around created a cocoon of ordinary noise. It wasn't until her coworker Lana spun her chair around and said, "Hey, do you remember that blog you had with the movie reviews? I was trying to show my partner that post you wrote about weight. Did I have the right person?" That Mira felt the first small shift. "You mean my old WordPress?" Mira asked. "Yeah, I took that down forever ago." Lana frowned. "No, I swear, I just saw it like last week. You sent me a link ages ago. I bookmarked it. I literally clicked it this morning and it said the page never existed. Maybe I mixed you up with someone else." She shrugged and turned back to her screen, already pulling a different tab open. Mira sat very still. When she got home that evening, she opened the vanishing point address again. The site remembered her. The progress bar picked up where it had left off, now gleaming just past the halfway mark, hovering at a notch labeled Stage 3, Peripheral Associations. Underneath, lines of text pulsed softly. Third-party mirrors, pruning, cached references, dissolving, external links, redirecting to null. At the bottom, new words came into view. Warning, others may notice missing connections. This is normal. Memory is adaptive. Do you wish to proceed to final stage? Y divided by N. Hifingas hoa? She thought about it all night. The second email from HR. The flicker of discomfort in people's faces when they scrolled too far down her search results. The way old versions of herself still sat, unchanged, in places she no longer visited. By midnight, she found herself back at the keyboard. "Why?" she typed. The progress bar slid into its final segment, marked only with a single phrase. Stage 4, Deep Reduction. For the first time, a small chat window opened at the corner of the page, borderless and fragile. "Please confirm," it wrote. "You wish to become functionally invisible to digital recall?" Mira typed, "Not invisible, just clean." There was a pause. Then, "Cleanliness and invisibility are neighbors. We will do what you asked. Please be aware, deeper traces are tangled with perception. Side effects may include misremembered interactions, misplaced attributions, vague absence in third-party accounts." She stared at the list. It was worded clinically, detached. "What does that mean?" she wrote. "People will forget me?" The reply came back with the same measured calm. "Not entirely. Presence will blur at the edges where it meets recorded history. You will still exist. You will simply matter less to the systems that watch and recall." Mira thought about living in a world where she left fewer footprints, where her mistakes, her awkward phases, her worst moments, no longer met strangers before she did. She typed, "Proceed." The bar moved, not steadily now, but in jerks and leaps, as if encountering resistance. In the following days, little things began to tilt. An old friend messaged her to ask, "Did you delete your wedding photos? I was trying to show someone your dress, but your tag is just gone." A former professor wrote to remind her that a paper she had co-authored years ago was being reprinted. When she opened the online journal, she saw her colleague's name, the title of their work, the abstract they had labored over together. Her own name, once listed just beneath, was missing. She refreshed the page 3 times. Finally, in small gray letters at the bottom, she found a single note. Original publication metadata incomplete. Attribution corrected. Her heart beat loudly in her ears. At the office, things grew stranger. Her ID badge stopped working one Monday morning. The reader at the door blinked red when she held it up. The receptionist frowned and typed her name into the system. "I don't know what's going on," he said, tilting the monitor toward her. "Look, on the screen, The employee directory hung open. Rows of names and photos scrolled past. Her own slot was a blank line, sandwiched between two coworkers she knew well. Where there should have been her picture, her title, her department, there was nothing but an empty field. We must have messed up. Something in the migration, the receptionist said, flustered. I'll have it fix it. It's fine. Go on in. I'll buzz you. He pressed a button, and the turnstile clicked. But as she walked to her desk, a thin, cool unease slid under her skin. At lunch, she overheard Lana and another coworker trying to remember who had designed a campaign they had all worked on the year before. I think it was you, the coworker said to Lana. No, I joined after that, Lana replied. Wait, wasn't it that freelancer? The one who left? They both fell silent, searching their memories, as Mira sat 3 seats away with her sandwich, listening. She wanted to speak up, to say, "It was me. It's right there in the files." But something about their puzzled expressions stopped her. She watched as, after a moment, they laughed it off and changed the subject. That night, she went straight home, opened her laptop, and forced the Vanishing Point site to load. The progress bar was nearly full now, a small sliver of space left at the end. A new message waited in the small chat window. Reduction nearing completion. Digital instances. Minimal. Metadata. Thinned. Associations. Weakening. Mira typed with more force than before. Stop, I want to undo it. The cursor flickered. We cannot reverse. The reply came. We can only complete or halt progression. Then halt it, she wrote. Halting leaves you between states. The site answered. Not fully visible. Not fully gone. Are you certain? She pictured her missing name on the office list. The vanished blog. The fading tags. The confusion in her coworker's eyes. And the blank line on the screen. I'm already between states, she wrote. The cursor blinked for a long time. Then finally, request to halt received. Processing. The progress bar froze just shy of the final notch. A thin, dark line remained unfilled, like a small, unfinished thought. For the first time since she had found it, the page did not tell her what would happen next. Days passed. Her ID was fixed. IT insisted it had been a database error. Her name reappeared on the office list. Her email signature worked. But when she searched for herself, the results were anemic. No photos. No blogs. Barely any tagged mentions. It was like looking up a stranger with her name. At a family gathering, her cousin tried to show an old video of them as kids at a birthday party. The file stuttered, glitched, and then played as if she had never been there. People laughed at jokes she remembered making. They reacted to a girl who no longer appeared on screen. That's weird, her cousin said, frowning. I swear you were in this one. Mira retreated to the hallway, breathing slowly. On the way home, she noticed how automatic cameras in public spaces seemed to glide past her. Facial recognition gates at the subway blinked for other passengers and barely acknowledged her. Tickets scanned slower. Machines hesitated. Not broken, just uncertain. At night, she dreamed of pages half-printed, of faces in photographs fading at the edges while the background remained sharp. The Vanishing Point site stayed stubbornly the same whenever she checked it. Progression, halted. State, liminal. Suggestion, acceptance. She typed, "What does acceptance mean?" "Live in the gap," it replied. "You are less recorded now. Fewer traces, fewer echoes. This is what you asked for." "I didn't ask to disappear from my own life," she wrote. Silence. Then, "You are still there. The system simply looked through you more often." Spring came. The company reorganized. New hires arrived who had never seen her long-ago posts, never read the old angry comment on that news article, never heard about the blog she had wiped. To them, she was just Mira from the design team, quiet, competent, present in person but oddly light in the digital channels everyone else seemed to swim in. One afternoon, a junior colleague messaged her from across the open plan office. "Hey, weird question," the message read. "Do you have LinkedIn? I tried to find you and couldn't. It's like you don't exist online." Kind of impressive, actually. Mira sat for a long time with her fingers resting on the keys. Finally, she typed back, "No, I don't think I ever really did." She closed the chat, then, after a moment's hesitation, closed her browser altogether. She unplugged her webcam, turned off automatic backups, set her phone to minimize location logging, not in a panic, not suddenly, but with the slow, deliberate care of someone adjusting to a new climate. Every now and then, she thought about returning to that hidden address, about asking Vanishing Point to finish what it had started, to push the progress bar the last few pixels to the end. But whenever she imagined it, she could feel the faintness of herself in other people's eyes, the way memories of her already slid just a little too easily out of focus. She did not want to know what it would feel like if that went any further. So she let the bar remain where it was. In the quiet corner of the internet where the site lived, a single entry in a single silent database marked a user whose reduction had stalled at 98%. Not present enough to register fully, not absent enough to dissolve. Around her, the world continued to record everything it could. Conversations, transactions, images, movements gathering data into endless archives that hummed and glowed. Mira walked through it, leaving faint footprints that faded almost as soon as they formed. People still greeted her. Friends still texted. Her family still called. In the places that mattered most, she was real enough, solid enough. It was only when she passed security cameras or saw herself in the glass reflection of a screen that she sometimes thought she could feel the thinness of her own outline, like a shape someone had traced in pencil and never colored in. And somewhere, deep down in the infrastructure of hidden networks and forgotten sites, Vanishing Point waited in its white windowless page, progress bar stalled, chat box empty. If anyone else ever stumbled across the address and read the old forum thread recommending it, they would find a familiar welcome message, the same calm warnings, the same blank line asking what they wanted removed. They would never see the quiet, unremarkable record of one user who had asked to be less visible and who had gotten exactly that, only to realize that some shadows, once thinned, never quite returned to their old weight. Story number 3. Rowan's sleep went bad slowly, the way a screen dims a fraction of a shade at a time, until one night the room feels darker for reasons that are hard to explain. He had always been a light sleeper, the kind of person who woke up when the elevator cables in his building groaned, or when a siren bounced off the glass outside. But around the time his job shifted from daytime support to the graveyard shift, his nights stopped feeling like nights at all. He worked from his studio apartment, a long, narrow room laid out like an old shoebox. Door at one end, bed pushed into the far corner by the single window, desk along the wall in between. When he wasn't on calls, he drifted through underlit forums and strange corners of the internet, looking for tips on staying awake, then on how to sleep again, then on what to do if neither really worked. It was in one of those threads, posted by an account with no history and no avatar, that he first saw the mention. If melatonin and blue light filters don't help, the message read, try this. It's weird, but it works. Deep web only. Insomnia clinic. Divided by sleep screen. Feels like someone else is taking your turn staying awake. Beneath that, an address that didn't belong on the regular web. Rowan sat back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. He knew better than to type strange addresses into his browser, but the thread nagged at him. The account that had posted it never commented again. Nobody in the replies acknowledged the link. It sat there like a forgotten note taped to a wall, quietly waiting for someone desperate enough to read it. At 4 a.m, with his shift over and his brain buzzing, Rowan was exactly that kind of desperate. He opened the hidden browser he used occasionally for privacy, not because he did anything illegal, but because it made him feel like he had a little patch of darkness in a world that was always lit. The software connected, bounced his signal around, and then settled into its familiar sluggish speed. He typed the address, letter by letter. The page took nearly a minute to load. When it finally appeared, it was far simpler than he'd expected. Just a black background with a pale line of text in the center. The sleep screen. Underneath, in smaller letters. For those who watch while others rest. For those who rest while others watch. Rowan's cursor hovered over the only clickable word on the page. Enter. He clicked. The site unfolded into a grid of small, dark windows, each labeled only with a number. Channel 1, Channel 2, all the way up to Channel 24. Most looked like rectangles of static darkness. A few flickered faintly, as if they contained something moving in dim shadows. At the bottom of the screen, a short instruction appeared. Pick one channel. Stay with it. Do not switch mid-cycle. Optimal viewing. 1:05 local time. Audio optional. Comments disabled between 2:22, 2:32. That last line made no sense, but it made the page feel strangely clinical, structured. Like an experiment with parameters, Rowan clicked on channel 12 at random. The window expanded, filling most of his screen. At first, all he could see was a murky rectangle that could have been a wall, with a darker strip that might have been a door frame. The quality of the video was low, as if compressed 1,000 times. Grain swam across the picture like underwater dust. He turned his speakers up. Silence. No hum, no static, just a pure, flat absence of sound. After a few seconds, his eyes began to adjust. It was a room, a bedroom probably, a narrow bed against a wall, a window just out of frame, its presence betrayed only by a faint angled stripe of slightly lighter darkness on the floor. There was a chair, empty. A nightstand with something on it, lamp? Book? The resolution was too poor to tell. Nobody was there. He watched for a full minute, wondering if the stream was frozen. Then, very slowly, so gradually he almost missed it, a shape on the bed moved. Sheets. Someone under them turning slightly. Rowan's breath eased out. He glanced at the clock on his desktop. 4:12 a.m. He should have been in bed himself. Instead, he watched a stranger sleep. It was surprisingly calming. The slow rise and fall, the utter stillness of the room. The camera itself never wobbled, never zoomed or panned. It looked like a cheap webcam bolted high in the corner of a ceiling, forgotten. He stayed for 30 minutes, then finally closed the page. When he lay down on his own bed, the rain against his window sounded like the quiet noise the sleep screen had lacked. He closed his eyes and, almost against his own expectations, he drifted off. The next night, he went back. The grid of channels looked the same. He clicked on 12 again, out of a vague sense of loyalty. Same room, same grain, same narrow bed. It might have been a still frame from the previous night, except this time the blinds on the unseen window cast a slightly different pattern of dim stripes on the wall. The sleeper lay on the other side of the bed, the slope of their shoulder barely visible under the covers. Rowan watched, telling himself he'd close the window in 10 minutes. At some point, without noticing, he started comparing it to his own place. His bed sat under his window. His desk against the wall, yes, but on the opposite side. His chair was different. The proportions of the room were similar, though, long and narrow. If his webcam pointed from the ceiling near the door, would his room look like this? He shook the idea away. There were 1,000 apartments like his in the city. On the third night, he noticed something else. He returned to channel 12 at 2:15 a.m., habit already forming. The familiar dim room filled his screen. This time, the bed was empty. The covers were rumpled, as if someone had just left. The door on the right side of the frame was ajar. A faint strip of even darker hallway stretched beyond. He leaned forward, expecting someone to walk back in. Nothing happened. 5 minutes passed. 10. The empty bed didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like a pause in a sentence that had gone on too long. He reached for the volume slider, even though there was no sound to adjust. Something about the total silence unnerved him now. At 2:22 a.m., a thin line of text scrolled across the bottom of the window. Comments disabled. Rowan blinked. He hadn't seen any comments to begin with. He moved his cursor around, checking the edges of the screen. In the bottom corner, half hidden, a dim symbol flickered into sight, the outline of a little chat bubble. He clicked on it. A vertical column slid out from the right side of the video, filling with faint gray text, each line tagged with a timestamp. 12 has better light tonight. Is the bed empty for anyone else? This angle always freaks me out. The messages were old, some from weeks ago, some from earlier that same night. The most recent one had been posted at 2 hours, 21 minutes, and 59 seconds. Don't type between 22 and 32. That's when they read. Rowan froze. The cursor pulsed in the chat input box, ready for him to join in. His fingers hovered over the keys, but something about that last message made a small, cold place open in his chest. He waited. For exactly 10 minutes, no new messages appeared. At 2:32, another line filtered quietly into the feed. Okay, you can talk again. Someone else replied immediately. Nothing happened, as usual. You thought something would? They don't read live, it's just superstition. Still, every channel goes quiet then. I just follow the rules. Rowan watched the empty bed and the door that stood slightly open. He imagined someone, somewhere, sitting in a room much like his, typing these messages while staring at the same view. He closed the chat. The next night, he tried Channel 3 instead, just to see what another feed looked like. A kitchen this time, with a round table and a low-hanging lamp that was turned off. Refrigerator humming in visible vibrations. A sink full of dishes that never seemed to move. It was interesting for a few minutes, but it didn't have the odd pull of Channel 12. He went back. The site let him. The warning about not switching mid-cycle, whatever that meant, didn't seem to trigger anything. Days turned into a week. Rowan's sleep pattern shifted. Instead of staring at his ceiling, worrying about work and noise and the future, he stared at the sleep screen until his eyes grew heavy. Watching someone else's stillness, someone else's empty door, seemed to trick his brain into relaxing. Then details started to line up in ways he could no longer ignore. On a Tuesday, the sleeper on Channel 12 rolled over, and the blankets slipped enough for Rowan to see the faint glint of a metal frame on the wall behind the bed. A picture frame. No, not exactly. A small rectangular mirror. Rowan had one just like it, a cheap purchase from a hardware store, hung in almost the same spot above his bed. He squinted, trying to make out the shape. Too blurry. 2 nights later, the view flickered for a moment, as if the stream had lagged. When it snapped back, the camera had shifted a fraction, showing more of the floor. A rug, pale, rectangular, with a worn-out patch in the corner where someone always stepped. Rowan looked down at his own floor. His rug was identical. The same thin fabric. The same frayed edge where he dragged his chair back from the desk every night. His rational mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe the same landlord had furnished a dozen units the same way. Maybe these were model apartments for a complex he'd never heard of. Maybe he was seeing patterns because he was tired. He told himself these things as he got up from his desk and walked back to his bed to compare the angle. Standing there, in the dim circle of light from his monitor, he tried to imagine where his webcam would have to be mounted to capture the same field of view. The answer came too quickly. Exactly in the upper corner by his door, where the ceiling and walls met in a soft triangle. He looked. Nothing was there. Just plaster and a faint cobweb he kept meaning to clear. That night, when he finally lay down, it took far longer to fall asleep. 3 days later, his internet connection flickered during his shift, forcing him to restart his router. When the connection came back, his notifications lit up all at once. One caught his eye. A private message on the Insomnia forum, from a username he didn't recognize. "Saw you mention late shifts," it read. "If you're using Sleep Screen, don't move anything in your room without watching the channel first. Just trust me." There was no way, he thought, that this stranger could know which site he'd visited. He checked the profile. It had been created that same day. No other posts. No origin. His fingers hovered over the keys as he typed a reply. "How do you know I'm using it?" No answer came. Later, when his work queue cleared, he tried to click through to the profile again. It returned an error. User not found. His history showed the message, but the sender had become blank, like a name tag that had been scratched off. That night, he went straight to Channel 12. The bed was empty again, but this time, the door was closed. He stared at the handle, barely visible, glowing faintly with some indirect light from somewhere. The chat bubble icon pulsed. He clicked it. A single new message sat at the bottom, time-stamped 5 minutes earlier. 12 looks tight tonight. Anyone else's room feel smaller lately? Rowan looked away from the screen to his own walls. The distance between his desk and the bed felt shorter somehow, the ceiling lower. It was nonsense, he told himself. Just his brain playing tricks after staring at the same digital room every night. He tried to type, "Yeah, same," just to prove to himself that he was being overly dramatic, that this was just a late-night crowd hyping each other into weird thoughts. But when he placed his hands on the keyboard, the cursor in the chat box did not move. Letters formed without his input. "Hey 12 watcher." The message typed itself slowly. "You're out of cycle. Go back to bed." End of quote. He snatched his hands away. On the screen, the words blinked, then deleted themselves character by character until the box was empty again. The chat feed remained still. No new messages appeared. His reflection in the darkened corner of the monitor looked paler than usual. He closed the browser, telling himself he was done. No more sleep screen. No more channels. No more empty rooms. For almost a week, he kept that promise. He read actual books. He listened to podcasts. He stared at the ceiling in the dark, fighting the temptation to check if Channel 12 was still there. When the urge got strong, he walked to the other side of his apartment, away from the desk, and sat with his back to the window instead. The nights did not get easier. Without the silent moving picture to absorb his brain's restless energy, his thoughts ran circles around themselves. Work, bills, the humming refrigerator, the thinness of the walls, the faint imaginary feeling that there was a higher vantage point in the room, a corner where someone might put a camera if they wanted to see everything. On the 8th night, unable to stand the uncertainty any longer, he gave in. Just a look, he told himself, just to see if it was gone. Maybe the site had vanished, taking the odd allure with it. He opened the hidden browser, typed the address from memory. The grid appeared, unchanged. The channels still listed, numbers on black. His mouse moved almost on its own. Channel 12. The feed opened. It was his room. Not just similar. His room. The same long, narrow layout. The same cheap mirror on the wall. The same desk pushed against the left side. With the same monitor, casting a rectangular glow. His bed, his rumpled blanket, his chair with one uneven leg. He saw himself too, sitting at the desk, back to the camera, staring at the monitor, wearing the same faded t-shirt he had on in that exact moment. He didn't move. Neither did the version of him on the screen. He lifted his hand, slowly, deliberately. On the sleep screen, his shoulder twitched, but the movement was a half-second late, like a stream buffering. His hand rose, following his own, always barely behind. Very carefully, he reached up and touched the side of his neck. On screen, his own hand made the same movement, lagging, then catching up. He didn't remember agreeing to let anyone film him. He checked the top of his monitor. No webcam. He had never owned one. His heart thudded in his chest, loud in the quiet room. He considered turning around, just to prove there was nothing in the corner, that the feed was some elaborate, uncanny mimicry, a composite image, a trick. He couldn't make himself do it. On screen, the version of him at the desk slowly moved one hand toward the mouse. Rowan's own hand stayed still. The cursor drifted over the sleep screen window. Clicked the small, pulsing chat bubble. The feed's chat column slid open. Only one line sat there, posted in faint gray text. Don't type between 2:22 and 2:32. That's when they read. He checked the clock. 2:21 a.m. On screen, his counterpart's cursor hovered in the chat box. Letters began to appear. If you're using sleep screen, don't move anything in your room without watching the channel first. Just trust me. Rowan watched himself send the message he had received days ago. Watched as, a moment later, that same line appeared in his Insomnia Forum inbox on his other monitor. A mirror of a moment he had lived, but not like this, not from above. For exactly 10 minutes, he and the figure on the screen stayed frozen, breathing, not touching the keys. At 2:32, a new line crept into the chat. Cycle confirmed. His screen flickered, just once, so fast he would have missed it if he'd blinked. When the picture settled, the view had changed. The camera seemed a few inches closer to the bed now, the angle narrower. The rectangle of the window frame filled more of the right side. The desk where he sat was almost out of frame. On the bed, someone was lying under the covers. Not him. Not yet. He looked over his shoulder, at his own empty bed. Then back at the screen, where the sleeping shape shifted. The blanket rising and falling, in a steady rhythm. He felt, rather than heard, something in the room adjust around him, like a house exhaling. The chat box emptied itself again. The input field blinked. Waiting. He typed, hands shaking slightly. Who is that? For the first time, a response came immediately. You, when you're done watching, the site wrote. Someone has to stay awake. Someone has to sleep. It's easier for both. If they're not the same person. He swallowed. The air in his apartment felt thin and overused. as if it had already passed through too many lungs. "I didn't sign up for this," he wrote. "You came every night," the reply said. "You kept the cycle. You filled the empty side. We only adjusted the angle. What happens if I stop?" he typed. "Silence. Then, someone else will wake in your place. You won't notice. They'll do the watching for a while." He thought about the vanished blog posts and other people's stories, the fading names, the way online systems sometimes lost track of those who slipped around the edges. "I don't want that," he wrote. The cursor in the chat box pulsed patiently. "Then keep your channel," the sleep screen answered. "Stay where you are. Watch, sleep, let the rooms trade places around you." On his monitor, the sleeper on the bed rolled over, turning their face just far enough toward the camera for him to make out a familiar curve of jaw, a shape of nose. Not an exact copy, softer, as if half-remembered. Rowan closed the entire browser with a single, furious motion. The screen went black. In the reflection, he saw only his own face, gaunt and overtired, framed by the outline of his room behind him. He went to bed without looking toward the ceiling corner. He slept, eventually, but his dreams were full of rectangles of light and the sensation of being watched by a version of himself that always blinked a fraction of a second too late. In the mornings that followed, his days were almost normal. Calls, emails, coffee. He did not go back to the sleep screen site. He uninstalled the hidden browser. He told himself that was the end of it. But on some nights, when he lay awake and the red digits of his clock ticked past 2:22, he felt a faint, impossible brightness touch his eyelids from somewhere above, as if a small, invisible indicator light had just blinked on in the upper corner of the room. And somewhere, in a dark grid of numbered channels, a narrow, familiar studio apartment continued to stream in ghostly low resolution, waiting patiently for whoever would take the next turn, staying awake, while someone else slept in the same bed, with the same blanket, under the same watchful ceiling. Story number 4. Nina liked to say that the internet was just a badly organized attic. Most people only ever saw the living room, the well-lit front of the web, where everything was labeled and dusted. But behind that, there were closets. Behind the closets, crawl spaces. Behind those, if you kept going, you found the places where things didn't quite belong anywhere else. Old copies, broken links, half-finished ideas. She was studying digital forensics, which meant she had been taught how to find traces on hard drives people thought were clean, how to pull images from memory dumps, how to follow packets as they slipped from one network to another. She knew how stubborn data could be, how it held on. Because of that, she was cautious with the hidden side of the web. She knew what was rumor and what was real. Most deep web horror stories were recycled urban legends and bad attempts at scaring newcomers. The reality was usually dull. Vendors selling things they shouldn't, forums for people who needed privacy, odd art projects. That was why the message caught her attention. She found it on a small, private board used by other students in her field. They traded tools and techniques, shared papers behind paywalls, complained about professors. The post was from a new account with no introduction. For anyone curious about deletion limits, it read, "Try this crawler. It's not a joke. Don't use on shared machines." Echo index. String of characters. Someone had replied beneath it, 3 minutes later. "Is this the one that maps dead sectors? I thought it was taken down." The original poster never answered. A moderator had added a note. "Use at your own risk. No guarantees it's safe. Sandboxed VM only." Nina told herself she would ignore it. Instead, later that night, when her roommates were asleep and the apartment hallway had gone quiet, she spun up a virtual machine, wrapped her connection in layers of anonymity, and copied the address. The page that loaded looked disappointingly old-fashioned. Plain, pale text on a dark background. Echo index. A catalog of residues and redundancies. Search only what you have a right to see. Do not request indices for anyone currently in your physical environment. Beneath the warning, a single search box waited. No logo, no ads, no about page, no explanation of how it worked. Nina sat back in her chair. Residues and redundancies sounded like a bad translation of some technical term. The warning about people in your physical environment, though that was oddly specific. She tested it with something harmless. In the box, she typed the username of a long-abandoned social media account she'd used in high school. It was an alias. One that no one in her current life knew about. She hit enter. For a moment, the page did nothing. Then a small line of text appeared. Billing index, source layers, 14. Surface visibility, 6%. Below that, a list materialized. It looked like search results, but wrong. The entries weren't links to pages as they were now. They were snapshots of how things had been. 20130517012209 vertical bar cached _ profile _ banner.jpg deleted 20130702194532 direct message thread 127 peer copy 20140110911354 vertical bar photo stream thumbnail set archived mirror. Nina felt a small tight thrill in her chest. These weren't from any public archive she knew. They read like the internal notes of a crawler that had recorded what it saw. Then someone had come along later and tried to organize those records. She clicked on the first item. A low-resolution version of an old banner image filled the center of the screen, a blurry photo of a concert stage from a band she'd forgotten she loved. Overlaid on top, light gray and barely visible, was a line, origin reference removed at user request, 2016. Residue persists in tertiary mirror. She backed out, opened the next. An old message exchange with a friend she hadn't spoken to in years. The friend's username was heavily blurred, unreadable. Only her own immature responses were clear. Beneath each, a short note. Source deleted. Counterpart retained. Partial reconstruction. Nina leaned forward. 100 questions bloomed in her mind at once. No one service should have access to all these pieces. They were from different platforms, different years, some from sites that had shut down entirely. On a whim, she typed her full name into the search bar. The page hesitated longer this time. Building index, source layers, 37, surface visibility, 42%. More results appeared. Student ID systems, online class discussion boards, old resumes cached by career sites. Nothing too surprising. What troubled her were the entries that didn't seem to come from anywhere online. 20061003182711 vertical bar home PC documents story idea txt local index copy 20070312210503 vertical bar scanned notebook page 4 photo backup private 2009082214167 voicemail transcript untitled carrière archive. She clicked on the scanned notebook page. Her own handwriting bloomed onto the screen in crooked lines she recognized. A middle school English assignment, scanned and uploaded to some early homework portal. She'd drawn a tiny cartoon in the margin. It was all there. Even the faint shadow of the spiral binding. She hadn't thought about that assignment in over a decade. The original paper was long gone. The note beneath the image read, User, accessible copy lost. Teacher backup wiped. Tertiary scan persists in anonymous training set. Nina's throat felt dry. It wasn't just that Echo Index could find old versions of things. It was that it seemed to know times why times the obvious copies were gone, and where the forgotten ones were still clinging to existence in training sets, in carrier archives. In the corner of the page, a small line of text flashed, almost an afterthought. Reminder, do not request indices for anyone currently in your physical environment. She minimized the window, listened. Her apartment was quiet. The two roommates who shared the place with her, Kyra and Jen, had gone to bed an hour ago. She could hear the faint hum of the dishwasher, the distant elevator in the hallway, nothing else. She told herself she'd gone far enough. But curiosity, in Nina, was a persistent thing. The next night she came back. Echo Index loaded without needing the special address again. It remembered her, in a way that felt uncomfortably personal for a page that had never asked her to log in. This time, she typed the name of an old friend from high school, someone she wasn't likely to ever see in person again. Someone far enough away to feel safe. The crawler's response was slower. The source layers count climbed higher. The results that appeared were much like her own. Cached photos, fragments of messages, bits of old profiles. When she clicked on one at random, a polite pop-up appeared over the page. Secondary consent required for deep viewing, it read. Surface level index only. She frowned. For herself, it had shown everything. For others, it blurred details. There was a boundary. Some kind of rule. She backed out. For a week, she used Echo Index like a strange private time machine for her own life. She found a half-finished novel in a folder she'd forgotten existed, reconstructed from a backup she hadn't known her first laptop made. She found an angry draft email she'd typed to her father at 20 and never sent. She found photos she'd thought she had carefully deleted from an old cloud account, living on in anonymous photo sets used to improve image recognition models. Each entry came with a little explanation, a small, neutral sentence that revealed just how many places a life could scatter into. She started to feel slightly exposed, even alone in her room with the blinds closed. If a site like this could assemble her history from 1,000 stray copies, what else was out there? One night, close to midnight, after a long day and too much caffeine, she stared at the search bar and thought about the warning again. Do not request indices for anyone currently in your physical environment. She glanced at the closed door of her bedroom. Kyra was away at her girlfriend's apartment. Jen had texted earlier to say she'd be working a late shift at the campus lab. Technically, she was alone. She typed Jennifer Cho, university name biology lab, into the search bar anyway, adding the details that would make the search more precise. For a long moment, the page stayed black. Then words ghosted onto the screen. Checking environment. Nina's fingers stilled over the keyboard. The room felt no different. Her laptop's fan hummed. The heater clicked on in the corner. A car rolled past outside. The line changed. Physical environment. 1 registered device. 1 registered user. No conflict detected. Proceeding. The familiar indexing text scrolled by. Building index. Source layers. 23. Surface visibility. 18%. Nina exhaled. Results appeared. The first few looked ordinary enough. Class rosters, a partial publication list, a medium-resolution photo from a conference. Then, lower down, something else. 20231004010217 vertical bar lab, notebook, scan, page, 197, personal cloud, misfiled. 20231005024133 vertical bar voice, memo, unnamed, 14, local cache fragment, 20231005031209 vertical bar draft, document, exit, plan, docx, autosave, offline. Her cursor drifted toward the last one before she could think better of it. A soft gray box jumped in front of it. Deep personal entries may contain heightened emotional content. You are not the primary subject. Continue? Y divided by N. This was wrong, she thought. Looking at her own records had felt like rummaging through a box she'd forgotten she owned. This was different. This was reading over someone's shoulder. Her better judgment and her curiosity wrestled, almost evenly. The curiosity won by a narrow margin. She typed, Y. The document opened as simple, black text on white. Echo Index had stripped the formatting, the fonts, everything that might have made it look like a normal word processor. At the top, a file name sat in faint gray. Exit, plan, doxy, autosave recovered, local, unsynced. Below it, lines of text. Schedule for moving out. Do not leave on desktop. Tell Nina about job offer once it's real. Talk to Kyra separately. Pack books last so it doesn't look obvious. Delete voice memos. Don't stay here past mid-November. Feels wrong lately at night. Nina swallowed. She scrolled. The note went on, more scattered. Tell them I love them, but I can't sleep here anymore. Someone keeps walking in the hallway between 2-3 a.m. No footsteps. Just the feeling. Don't mention the dreams. It will sound crazy. Move somewhere without vents that connect to other apartments. There was a gap, then a single line. Something in the walls listens when we talk about leaving. At the bottom, a timestamp. Last modified. The 5th of October 2023, 3 hours 12 minutes and 9 seconds. Offline session. Nina checked the date. October 5th, 3 days ago. She sat back in her chair and stared at her bedroom wall, the one she shared with Jen's room. She could hear nothing but the heater and the building's small, normal sounds. On her screen, another line of text appeared beneath the document, in Echo Index's neutral style. Note: original file present only in volatile memory at time of capture. Current device scan shows no user, accessible copy. Jen must have typed it and never saved it properly. Maybe her laptop crashed. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she had thought no one would ever see it. Nina closed the document. Her chest hurt in a dull, guilty way. She checked her phone. No new messages. The apartment felt a little smaller. For 2 nights, she avoided Echo Index completely. She went to classes, graded labs for her TA job, pretended not to notice how tired Jen looked in the mornings, or how often she glanced at the shared wall while pouring coffee. On the 3rd night, she woke up at 2:41 a.m., heart beating fast for no clear reason. The room was dark. Her phone lay on the floor by the bed where it had fallen when she'd rolled over. She heard it then. ABO. Faint, careful sound in the wall. Not footsteps. More like a steady, slow pressure traveling along the vents. A shift in the thin layer of space between apartments. Not loud enough to be obvious, just enough to feel like something moving without mass. She held her breath. The sound passed. The heater clicked on again, louder, masking it. By morning, she'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. She went straight to campus, stayed late in the lab, buried herself in analyzing disk images until the lines of hex blurred. When she came home, the apartment was empty. Kyra had left a note on the fridge. Jen's door was open, her backpack missing. Nina told herself Jen had gone to the lab or to meet a friend. She went to her own room, closed the door, and almost without intending to, opened the virtual machine. Echo Index greeted her with its calm, unchanging text. She stared at the search bar. She should have typed her own name. She should have looked up harmless old files again. Instead, before she could stop herself, she typed, Jennifer Cho, University name Biology Lab, UP dated. The page flickered. Existing index found. Checking for new layers. The progress text scrolled. New write events detected. Deep entries. Tway. Recency. Is less than 24 hours. 2 new items appeared at the top of the list. 2023, 10.7, 2019, 44. Voice, memo, unnamed, 17, lokal, not saved. 2, 0, 2, 3, 1, 0, 0, 7, 0, 2, 2, 6, 0, 3, lab, notebook, scan, page, 214, Coid, unsent. And one more, marked differently. 2023-1007023159 vertical bar corridor, cam, buffer, 3, security overwrite, transient. Restricted view. Nina's mouth went dry. She clicked the voice memo first. Echo Index didn't play the audio. It showed a rough transcript instead, words auto-captioned by some imperfect machine ear. Okay, this is stupid, the text began. But if I don't say it out loud, it'll just keep buzzing in my head. I thought it was just the vents. I thought it was just neighbors. But last night, when I was leaving the lab, the motion lights in the hallway turned on before I walked under them, like something ahead of me was already there. And then when I came home, I heard it again in the wall by Nina's room. It's like the sound knows when I'm thinking about leaving. I know that sounds off. I'm just tired. I'm going to finish the cultures tonight, and then maybe crash at the lounge. I'll feel stupid about this in the morning. Deleting after. Bye. Beneath the text, a note. Original file flagged for deletion at end of recording. Carrier buffer captured transient copy. Nina's hands shook on the mouse. She should have stopped. Instead, she clicked on Lab, Notebook, Scan, Page 214. The image that loaded was of a notebook page, the neat grid of lab paper filled with Jen's small, precise handwriting. Most of it was mundane dates, sample numbers, temperatures. At the bottom of the page, in a different pen, a quick note ran sideways along the margin. If anything happens, check the camera logs for corridor, 3 farads around 2:30 a.m. I swear it didn't feel like I was alone. The timestamp matched the third entry Echo Index had listed. Corridor, cam, buffer, 3, security overwrite, transient, restricted view. When she tried to click it, another warning popped up. Live or near. Live third-party surveillance streams may contain sensitive content. User is not an authorized security viewer. Override anyway? Y divided by N. Nina didn't consider herself reckless. She also knew that corridor 3 farads was the one outside the biology lab. She had walked it 100 times. She could picture, without trying, the long stretch of tile, the vending machines humming near the elevator, the door with the faulty closer at the far end. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. She typed, Y. The video that loaded was silent and tinted a dark, institutional gray. A timestamp sat in the corner. The 7th of October 2020. 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 41 seconds. Corridor 3 faradio. The frame rate was choppy, like an old security system recording on a loop. The corridor was empty. The vending machines glowed faintly. No one walked through. After a moment, the footage jumped, as if a few seconds had been skipped. The lights at the far end of the hallway flickered on in sequence, activated by some motion the camera hadn't quite caught yet. But no one was there. The doors remained closed. The floor stayed bare. The elevator display showed no change. One by one, the overhead lights inched closer down the hall, as if following something that didn't register on camera. At the near end, the lab door to Jen's workspace was visible. It did not open. The timestamp ticked from 2 hours 31 minutes and 59 seconds to 2 hours 32 minutes. The video stopped. A small note faded onto the lower edge of the window. End of buffer. Original overwritten by newer footage. No official record retained. Nina stared at the frozen frame. The next line that appeared was not part of the video. Environment check. Discrepancy detected. The Echo Index interface overlaid the footage, subtle but unmistakable. In the corner, the little reminder text pulsed more brightly now. Do not request indices for anyone currently in your physical environment. Beneath it, new words. Current physical environment. 1 registered device. 0 registered users. The room felt suddenly, terribly big around her. She looked at her door. She looked at the wall she shared with Jen's room. She tried to call Jen. The call went straight to voicemail. Panic surged up, but Echo Index's flat, machine-styled responses kept coming, oblivious. New write event detected. Subject: Nina. Last name: log type: ambient. A new entry appeared under her own name, pushing the rest down. 20231007024113. Vertical bar ambient, residual, log, apt, 4b, local environment, ongoing. Live, view. As she watched, text flowed into it, line by line, like a transcript being written in real time. User sitting at desk, viewing forbidden index. Art rate elevated, heater cycling on. Small building shift in shared wall. External presence adjusting route. The last phrase made her vision tunnel. Her cursor darted to the corner of the screen, toward the power icon. User attempting disconnect. The log wrote a second later. Link persistence priority raised. She yanked the power cable from the laptop. The screen went dark. The sudden absence of the glow made her room feel like a different place entirely, edges sharp and heavy. For a long moment, she sat in that darkness, listening. No footsteps, no voices. Only the heater and the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. Slowly, her eyes adjusted. The laptop, dead and blank, reflected a vague shape of her own face. She forced herself to stand, to step away from the desk, to open her bedroom door. The apartment hallway was empty. The light in the small kitchen flickered slightly, tired. Jen's door was still open. Her bed was unmade, the way it had been earlier. Her notebook lay on her desk, closed, a pen on top. Nina didn't touch anything. She found her phone and called campus security, her voice steady and practical as she reported that a friend might not have made it home from the lab. They took her seriously enough. They said they would check. And of lactic E. She did not mention echo index. She did not mention the camera buffer, or the way the hallway lights had followed something invisible. She slept for a few hours near dawn, fully dressed, light on. In the morning, she learned that Jen had emailed the lab supervisor around 3, saying she was feeling strange and was going to lie down in the staff lounge for a bit. No one had seen her after that. Her phone had stopped responding somewhere between campus and home. The official language in the emails that followed was careful and vague. Nina's own inbox filled with messages about community support resources and ongoing efforts to locate our student. She kept her laptop unplugged. She did not open the virtual machine. For 2 days, she avoided screens as much as someone in her life could. She went to class, sat in the back, left early. She ate in the cafeteria instead of in front of her monitor. At night, she read old paperbacks by flashlight until her eyes ached. The building's small, ordinary noises continued. The vents breathed, the walls settled. Somewhere above, someone's TV murmured. On the third night, at 2:41 a.m., Nina woke up as if someone had called her name. Her room was quiet. The heater was off. On her desk, in the faint ambient light from the street, her laptop sat dark and closed. For a long time, she lay still, telling herself she would not touch it. Then, like a person moving underwater, she stood, crossed the room, and pressed the power button. The machine booted. She did not open the virtual machine. She did not open a browser. Still, as the desktop came into view, a small window blinked into existence in the lower right corner of the screen. No recognizable program. No title. Just a simple gray box with text. Ambient residual. Log. Apt 4B 2 0 2 3 1 0 0 9 0 2 4 1 1 3. New entries available. She hovered the cursor over the small X in the corner. Another line appeared first. Note: local logging persists once initiated, regardless of external connection status. You left the window open once. We did the rest. Her hands shook. She clicked the notification despite herself. The window expanded into a scrollable field of text. Lines poured up from the bottom, time-stamped, familiar. User returns from campus. Avoids eye contact with neighbors. User Googles, missing person last seen leaving lab. User closes browser before reading first result. Later, user lies awake, listening for wall sound. External presence reroutes through upper vent instead. And, on the current line, still writing, user awakens at 2:41, moves to desk, powers on device. Awareness of index growing. Continuation likely, unless interrupted. Below that, the slightest hint of a new line, half-formed. External presence, evaluating new route of approach. Walls insufficient, considering. Nina slammed the laptop shut. The click of plastic on plastic echoed louder than it should have. She unplugged it again for good measure. Then, on shaking legs, she picked the machine up, carried it to the kitchen, and slid it into the back of a cabinet behind a stack of old pots they never used. Back in her room, she sat on the bed, breathing slowly. The building's ordinary sounds returned gradually, like a volume knob turning up. Somewhere in the walls, pipes clicked and settled. She thought of the warning that had been there from the start. Search only what you have a right to see. Do not request indices for anyone currently in your physical environment. Maybe that had never really been about privacy or consent as she understood it. Maybe it had been about boundaries, about keeping certain lines from crossing so that whatever listened in the walls, in the vents, in the invisible corners of the network where cached copies of everything lived, wouldn't have an easy excuse to start keeping its own logs of the living space around a person. She couldn't bring herself to throw the laptop away. Not yet. That would draw questions. For now, it would stay in the dark cabinet, away from outlets, away from her room. She bought a cheap second-hand notebook the next day and started taking notes there instead. Paper and ink. No backups. No cameras. Sometimes, alone in her room with the lights off, she still heard something move faintly in the shared wall. A shift. A slow, thoughtful sound, like a listener changing position. She did not speak aloud when she was near that wall. She did not type her own name into any search bar she did not recognize. And somewhere, in a hidden attic of the internet where crawlers stored their fragments in mirrors, Echo Index sat quietly with a half-finished ambient log for apartment 4B, cursor blinking at the end of an interrupted line. No one came to close it. Story number 5. Caleb found the link in a thread that was supposed to be about anxiety medication. He wasn't even deep in the hidden web at first. He'd started on a normal forum, one of those places where usernames and avatars floated above long paragraphs about side effects and coping mechanisms. Somewhere around page 12, the conversation drifted from prescriptions to sleep, then from sleep to strange things people claimed had helped them when nothing else did. One user mentioned guided meditations. Another recommended journaling. Buried between them, a short post from an account with no picture, no history, and a name that looked like a random string of letters. If writing it down helps but you can't stand to see it later, try this instead. It doesn't save anything the way you think. Only use it at night. When you're alone. Echo, depth, penitent line. No one replied to that message. No moderator removed it. It just sat there, a quiet door placed in the middle of an ordinary hallway. Caleb bookmarked it and told himself he wouldn't use it. By the end of the week, he had changed his mind. He lived alone in a small one-bedroom above a closed shop. The kind of place where the walls were slightly too thin, and the stairwell always smelled faintly of old paint. He worked late in a support center across town, talking to people who were upset or confused or angry. When he came home, his head was full of other people's words, and his own never really had anywhere to go. He had tried journaling. It made his worries feel heavier when he saw them written out. He had tried meditation videos. They made him more aware of how fast his thoughts spun. The night he finally opened the bookmarked link, rain tapped at his single window, and the rest of the city felt very far away. He used the browser he kept for the other side of the web, the kind that wrapped his connection in layers and made everything slow down. The address from the thread wasn't a normal URL. It pointed to a hidden service, tucked behind networks of other people's traffic. The page that loaded was simple. A dark background, a single block of muted text in the center. The penitent line, below, in smaller letters. For burdens that won't leave when spoken aloud. For guilt that doesn't deserve a file. No crimes, no harm to others, no names. We cannot absolve, but we can arrange. There was a text box beneath the words, big enough to hold a paragraph or two. No login prompt, no ads, no menu, just one blinking cursor. Caleb tilted his head. It could have been anything. A half-finished art project, a writing exercise, a prank. Someone had gone out of their way to make it look plain. He read the line about no crimes, no harm to others twice. It felt oddly specific, like the creators didn't want to attract a certain type of person. Below the box, one final instruction appeared, fading in slowly. Type whatever will not let you sleep. Press send. Do not keep a copy. He stared at the cursor for a long time before typing a single sentence. I lied on my resume for this job. He didn't go into detail. He didn't name companies or dates or people. He just let the admission sit there, fragile and small. His finger hovered over the enter key. Then he pressed it. For a moment, nothing changed. The text he'd written dissolved, fading out letter by letter until the box was empty again. The cursor returned to its blinking, patient rhythm. Caleb frowned. A line of new text appeared above the box. We've heard that before, it said. Thank you for offering it up. A second line joined it. Small penance. Tomorrow, reply honestly when your manager asks how you're holding up. Don't say fine if you're not. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It was gentle. Not accusatory. Not dramatic. Just a suggestion. He closed the page and went to bed. The next day, halfway through his shift, his manager stopped by his station and asked the usual question. You doing all right with the volume today? Caleb started to say, yeah, fine, the way he always did. What came out instead was, honestly, I'm a little overwhelmed. His manager looked surprised, then nodded. Thanks for saying so. Let me see if I can shuffle a couple of the more difficult calls. It wasn't a big change, no dramatic revelation. Still, on the way home, Caleb thought about the small line of text on the hidden page and how simple the penance had been. That night, he went back. The penitent line greeted him with the same plain screen. The text box waited. The warning about no crimes, no names, still sat calmly above it. He typed more this time. I avoid calling my mother back because I don't know what to say. I tell myself I'm busy, but really I just feel tired all the time. He sent it before he could overthink it. Again, the words faded out. Again, a response appeared after a short pause. We understand that one too. Distance wears different masks. A moment later, small penance. Schedule a call, but set a timer. Tell her at the start that you only have 15 minutes. Give her that time completely. Then rest after, without guilt. At the bottom, in faint text, a note. We do not store your confessions. We only keep the shape of them, so we can balance weight. Caleb sat with that for a while. Balance weight. The suggestion sounded like it came from a person, not a simple script. Maybe there was a group somewhere on the other side of this, reading and replying. Maybe they took turns. He followed the instruction the next day. 15 minutes with his mother, no phone in his hand, no screen in front of him. When the timer chimed, he said, I have to go, but let's talk again soon. And for once, didn't feel that lingering pressure afterward. It worked well enough that he came back again and again. He kept the penitent line a secret, the way some people kept a favorite bench in a crowded park to themselves. The confessions he offered up were small at first. I told a friend I'm happy in this city, but I'm not sure I am. I pretend not to hear my neighbor when he coughs at night. I skipped my sister's birthday last year because seeing her happy made me feel worse about my own life. Each time, the page responded with the same soft tone. We've seen that shape before. That burden is lighter than you think. Small penance. Send a message. Leave the door unlocked for 10 minutes. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Just once. Look up when you walk tomorrow. The tasks were strangely specific, but never difficult, never harmful. Sometimes they were so mundane they almost made him laugh. Still, there was something comforting in following instructions that seemed tailored to him, even if the tailoring might have been a coincidence. He never saw an ad, never saw a request for money, never saw any hint of who was on the other side. Weeks passed. One night, after a long shift where a caller had yelled at him for 10 straight minutes over something he couldn't fix, Caleb came home more exhausted than usual. His hands were still shaking with adrenaline that had nowhere to go. He opened the penitent line without thinking. This time, his confession ran longer. I think someone has been following me from the bus stop, he wrote. I know that sounds paranoid. It's probably nothing. But twice this week I've heard the same footsteps behind me when I turn off the main road. When I look back, I don't see anyone. My heart races so fast I feel sick. I don't tell anyone because I don't want them to tell me I'm imagining it. He sent it. The words dissolved as always. The reply took longer than usual to arrive. When it did, it was different. That one is heavier, the line said. Thank you for trusting us with it. A second line appeared almost immediately. Medium penance. Tomorrow night, when your shift ends, do not take your usual route home. Walk the longer way, past the closed bakery, instead of the alley. If you can, leave work 5 minutes later than you usually do. Caleb frowned at the screen. It could be coincidence, he told himself. Generic safety advice. The penitent line couldn't actually times his route. Unless he'd somehow mentioned the alley before? Had he? He checked his previous messages. There was no archive. Each confession had vanished as soon as he sent it. He could have closed the page then and ignored the suggestion. Instead, when the next night's shift wound down, he stared at the clock and deliberately stayed in his chair for 5 extra minutes, pretending to tidy his desk. On the walk home, he turned away from the narrow alley he usually cut through and stayed on the main sidewalk until he reached the bakery's dark storefront. The longer route added 4 minutes to his commute. As he rounded the corner near the shop, he glanced back. A car he recognized from the night before, a silver sedan with one flickering headlight, idled at the mouth of the alley he would have taken. After a few seconds, it rolled slowly on, then turned away. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was something. On his computer that night, the penitent line's response was waiting before he even typed. Thank you for accepting adjustment, it said. Weight moved. Nothing owed tonight. Sleep. He lay awake longer than he meant to, thinking about that single phrase. Weight moved. On the hidden web, forums talked about load balancing for servers, about distributing traffic. The words weren't unfamiliar, but something about the way the penitent line used them made him feel as if his life had been added to an invisible spreadsheet. He told himself not to use it for a few days. He lasted until the weekend. After that, the tasks the page suggested began to change. They became less about things he should do, and more about things he should avoid. Tonight, do not sit in your usual chair. At exactly 1:15, be in the kitchen instead. Do not answer calls from unknown numbers after 23 for the rest of this week. If you see someone you know on the opposite side of the street tomorrow morning, do not cross immediately. Wait until a bus passes. Each time, nothing dramatic happened when he followed the instructions. Sitting in the kitchen at 1:15 a.m. felt vaguely ridiculous. Ignoring late calls meant he got more sleep. Waiting to cross the street just made him late for the bus. Once, when he almost forgot and moved toward the curb immediately, a cyclist flew past out of nowhere, so close the wind from their movement brushed his sleeve. He stepped back on instinct, heart pounding. He could have brushed it off as coincidence. People on bikes didn't need prophecy, but a pattern was taking shape in his mind now. He started to wonder what would happen if he didn't follow a suggestion. The penitent line never threatened. It never said, or else. It just shifted words around ways that implied a kind of quiet consequence. If you accept this penance, someone else will carry your old weight in smaller pieces. We'll spread it thin. It will feel like nothing to them. He thought about that sentence for days. Someone else. He hadn't asked, and the site hadn't explained, but the idea stuck. If the line arranged things on his behalf, where did the imbalance go? What was being moved, exactly? Fear? Risk? Chance? One night, half out of defiance, half out of curiosity, he typed his question into the box. Are you moving bad things away from me toward other people? He hit send. The screen stayed blank a little longer this time, as if something on the other side was considering its answer. We move weight, it wrote finally. We cannot create or destroy it. We distribute. You came to us asking to sleep. We answered in the only way we can. That's not an answer, Caleb whispered to the empty room. On the page, a new line appeared. Small penance if you choose it. Tomorrow. Decline the invitation you will receive to drink after work. Go home instead. Leave the others to each other. He closed the site without responding. The next day, one of his coworkers did, in fact, suggest grabbing a drink after their shift. Caleb opened his mouth to say yes, then felt an odd, thin tension cross his shoulders. He said, I'm exhausted. Rain check? They shrugged and went without him. He walked home alone, feeling both relieved and sharply uneasy. Later that night, mind racing, he returned to the penitent line. I don't want anyone else to be punished for me, he wrote. If that's what this is, I'm done. The reply came faster than he expected. No punishments, it said. Only rebalancing. Some carry more, some less, for a time. Most never notice. A missed bus. A spilled drink. A wayward text. It all evens out. Caleb thought of the silver sedan idling in the alley, of the cyclist who would have hit him, of the invitation to drinks he'd declined because a line of text on a hidden site told him to. What about bigger things? He typed, fingers unsteady. What if what you move is more than a spilled drink? The cursor blinked. Then we spread it thinner, the line replied. But we cannot thin everything. Sometimes a heavier piece slips through. You have avoided several already. He sat very still. At the bottom of the page, a small new sentence appeared in a different shade of gray. We are required to tell you, every weight you do not carry finds another route. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, another instruction waited. Major penance available, it said, as if offering a bargain on a screen in a game. Accepting it will settle much of what clings to you. Refusing it will leave things as they stand. What is it? He asked. The answer typed itself out, one word at a time, as though it wanted him to feel the length of it. Tomorrow night, it said. When you come home, stay inside. Lock your door. Turn off your lights at 23:55. Do not look through the peephole. Do not open the door for times. Anyone times. Until 6. No matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name, If you accept this penance, type, I accept. Caleb stared at the words until they blurred. It sounded like superstition, a dare, something kids might invent at a sleepover, except this was on a site that had once told him to stand in his kitchen at 1:15 a.m. and had somehow known about a car in an alley. What happens if I don't? He wrote. Then you will walk your usual pattern, the site replied. And whatever waits on that pattern will meet you there. Others will feel less for a while. The room seemed to contract around him. He thought of his mother's voice on the phone, of his sister's messages, of the way his building's stairwell echoed when someone else's door opened on his floor. He did not know if the penitent line was telling the truth. He did not know if at times could times tell the truth. He also did not know, anymore, how much of his life he was willing to leave to chance. Slowly, he typed, I accept. The reply came with no delay. Penance scheduled. We will balance around you. The next day crawled by. At work, he stared at his screen, barely registering the calls that came and went. By the time his shift ended, the sky outside was a flat, colorless gray. The bus home felt stranger than usual, each person on it a possible pivot point in some invisible equation. He checked his phone again and again. No new messages from the penitent line appeared outside the hidden browser. It stayed where he'd left it, locked behind layers. At home, he ate a late dinner without tasting it. The clock on his wall inched toward midnight. At 23:50, he stood in the middle of his small living room, listening. The building murmured its usual sounds. Someone on the floor below moved a chair. A distant television rattled faintly through the walls. At 23:55, he turned off his lights. The apartment folded into shadow. Only the dull glow from the street lamp outside seeped through his thin curtains. He locked the door, checked it twice, then sat on the floor with his back against the frame, as if his weight could add to the security of the bolt. Midnight came and went. For a while, nothing happened. His breathing slowed. A part of him began to feel foolish. Then, somewhere around 0:20, a door downstairs slammed hard enough that the sound jumped up through the stairwell. Voices rose briefly, then cut off. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. They were not hurried, not frantic, measured, steady, coming closer. Caleb pressed himself gently against his own door, every muscle poised. The footsteps stopped on his floor. Silence. Then, a soft scrape, as if someone were adjusting their stance just outside his doorframe. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number flashed on the screen. Hey, it's me. Can you let me in? I forgot my key. No name. His building was small. He knew his neighbors by sight, if not by name. Their voices filtered through the walls often enough. The text might have been meant for someone else. Another buzz. Sorry, wrong number. The next message read, without his answering. On the other side of the door, a low, polite knock sounded. Not urgent, not aggressive. 3 light taps. He stared at the peephole, the small dark circle at eye level. He wanted, very badly, to look. His phone buzzed again, vibration loud against the quiet. This time the screen showed his sister's name. He answered in a whisper. Hello? Her voice came through, sleepy. Hey, you okay? I just woke up from a weird dream about you. Something with a hallway. You were... Her words blurred into the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears. There's someone at my door, he whispered. Don't hang up. On the other side of the wood, the knock came again, a little firmer. Caleb? A woman's voice, muffled by the door. It sounded familiar, in the way a voice from a recording sometimes did. It's your neighbor. I think there's a leak. My ceiling. His hand twitched toward the lock. On the screen of his phone, a faint line of text slid across the top, a notification from no app he recognized. Do not open, it said, in the same flat style as the penitent line's responses. Do not look. Balance in progress. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered, unsure who he meant it for. After a moment, the knock stopped. Footsteps retreated down the hall, the sound smaller now. Somewhere below, a door opened, then closed again. He sat there until the clock on his stove, visible through the dim doorway to the kitchen, blinked 6:1. Only then did he unlock the door and open it a crack. The hallway was empty. The worn carpet held no obvious marks. A faint, damp smell drifted up from below, as if someone had left a basement window open in the rain. Later that day, in the stairwell, he overheard two residents from the floor beneath his talking in hushed voices. "Burst pipe," one said. "In 2B, right above them. Water everywhere. Middle of the night, too. Plumber said if it had gone another hour, it would have flooded the wiring." "Were they home?" the other asked. "No idea. Knocked, but nobody opened. Guess they're away." Caleb walked past them with his head down, suddenly aware of how light his own footsteps sounded. He did not open the penitent line that night, or the night after. A week went by. Small things happened, as small things always do. A bus he planned to catch broke down before it reached his stop, but another arrived. A friend texted to say they'd almost been in a car accident but had turned left instead of right at the last second. His manager mentioned that the company next door had a break-in over the weekend. He told himself that none of it had anything to do with him. The world was full of near misses and misfortunes. He deleted the hidden browser from his desktop. He bought a paper notebook. He started writing his worries there instead, tearing out pages and ripping them into pieces when he was done. Sometimes, very late, when the apartment felt too quiet, he thought he saw faint text at the edge of his vision, like a notification that disappeared when he turned his head. He never checked. Somewhere, in a corner of the hidden web that didn't show up on maps or mainstream explanations, the penitent line continued to flicker. People arrived, typed out their sleepless worries, and watched them dissolve. They received small suggestions. They followed them, or didn't. They slept better, or they didn't. On the server, no one stored their names. Only the shapes of their confessions remained: metadata, patterns, weights. When someone like Caleb stopped logging in, their entry in that unseen ledger shifted from active to settled. The weight they had refused or accepted went on moving through the lives around them in ways no screen would ever display. And above a closed shop in a quiet building, a man who had once relied on an anonymous page to tell him when to stay in or go out learned to live with a slightly heavier step, as if some of that weight had finally settled where it belonged. He never knew for certain what would have waited for him on the other side of the door if he'd opened it that night. He only knew that, when he walked past the bathroom in the apartment below his, he sometimes heard the faint echo of water running where the ceiling had been patched, and felt, in that sound, something like a shifted burden. Story number 6. Lila translated other people's words for a living, and sometimes that made her own feel thin. She worked the late shift for a small agency that handled subtitling for foreign films and niche documentaries. It was quiet work hours of listening to voices, pausing, rewinding, searching for the right phrase in another language that would carry the same weight without throwing the timing off. Her apartment matched the work. A narrow, fifth-floor space in an old building at the edge of the city. One long room, split into makeshift zones by furniture. Desk by the window. Bed tucked into a corner. Kitchen just big enough for one person to stand in at a time. The building itself had been converted from something older. The walls were too thick for the layout. The pipes made strange, echoing sounds at odd hours. Most nights, after finishing a file, she would drift online, letting her eyes rest on text instead of the flicker of faces. She read message boards in languages she barely knew anymore, browsed old archives, occasionally strayed into the darker, quieter corners of the web, where the layout still looked like it belonged to another decade. That was where she found Relay 9. It wasn't advertised. There were no big, ominous posts about it. Just a casual mention, half buried in a thread about obsolete messaging apps. If you miss old chat rooms, one user had written, and you're not afraid of ghosts in the machine, try Relay 9. It stitches dead protocols together. Warning: some channels are stuck on sessions that never ended right. Someone had replied. Creepy phrasing. But yeah, it works. Feels like walking through old conversations. Thinning the fare. Someone else. Don't click anything tagged legacy, active, just lurk. Trust me, there was no direct link, only the hint of an address. Lila had to reconstruct it from the way people talked around it, piecing together technical hints, the way she pieced together fragments of sentences in work files. By the time she reached the login page, it was well past midnight. The interface that loaded on her screen could have been from 15 years earlier. A gray background, a box for a username, a drop-down listing gateways, names of messaging networks that mostly no longer existed. At the top, in small text, a line read, Relay 9. Cross-protocol repeater for orphaned sessions. No logs preserved beyond buffer time. Do not connect from shared devices. Underneath another phrase, out of place among the technical details. Some connections never closed. Handle with care. Lila chose a username she'd never used anywhere else. Glossa37. It felt neutral, unrelated to her real life. She clicked, enter as guest. A list of channels appeared, each with a short description and a string of numbers. Film chat, Elfheim Vishmona, Elif Matin Vitesha, late, night, dev, support, Q, legacy. Most had tags, archive, read-only, replay, mirror. A few near the bottom were flagged differently. Legacy, active. She remembered the comment on the forum and scrolled past those. Curiosity pulled her toward a channel labeled simply, number off hours. Its tag read, mixed, log. User count, 4. She clicked. The screen filled with what looked at first like an ordinary group chat. Usernames scrolled by. Sleepless. Shift key. Tilde marrow. Messages flickered in pale lines. Sleepless. Anyone here, actually at work. Rhine. Shift key. Define work. Tilde marrow. I am. Different kind. Sleepless. Oh, it's you again. The timestamps were strange. Some were from years ago, others from mere minutes. It was as if someone had spliced old conversations into newer ones, leaving no clean seam. A system message appeared in a different color. Relay, new participant joined. Glossa37. Almost immediately, a line appeared beneath it. Tilde marrow. Welcome new handle. Lila hesitated, then typed. Glossa37. Hi. Just looking around. Shift key. Tourist. Sleepless. At this hour? Sure. Tilde marrow. We get a lot of translators and support staff. Off-hours workers leak in. Something about the timing, I guess. Lila blinked. She hadn't mentioned her job. Glossa37. Why translators? Tilde marrow. You're used to other people's words. It's not a big jump to walking through other people's conversations. She told herself it was a lucky guess. Plenty of people worked odd hours. Plenty of them could be translators. The channel flowed on with light chatter. Sleepless complained about an NEC's overnight shift at a hospital. Shift key posted a link to an old song that no longer played when she clicked it. Marrow said little, but when he did, it was often a quiet observation that seemed to ground the others. Lila sat in the background, watching, occasionally adding a comment. After half an hour, she logged off, telling herself she had just been curious, that it was like bumping into strangers in an all-night cafe. The next night she came back. Relay 9 loaded faster this time, as if her machine had remembered the path. The channel list refreshed. Number off hours still showed 4 users. She rejoined. Relay, Glossa37 connected. Sleepless. Ah, translators back. Shift key. Tell me something in another language so my brain believes there's a world outside this cubicle. Lila obliged with a simple phrase. Something benign. Tilde marrow. How's the rain? She stared at the line. Outside her window, rain tapped gently on the glass. It hadn't been raining earlier in the evening. She hadn't mentioned it. She typed carefully. Glossa37. It just started. Tilde marrow. I can hear it. Sleepless. Pudic. Shift key. Creepy. More like. Marrow quickly corrected himself. Tilde marrow. Sorry. I meant, I've got rain too. Bad habit. Saying it that way. She let it go. People anthropomorphize the net all the time. I can hear you. I see what you mean. It didn't have to be literal. The third night. The detail was harder to dismiss. She joined number off hours a little after 1 in the morning. Half a cup of coffee left on her desk. Relay. Glossa37 connected. Sleepless had already logged off. Shift key was complaining about a bug in some late-night code. Shift key. Why does everything break after midnight? Tilde marrow. Because after midnight is when people who aren't supposed to be here show up. Shift key. You say that like you're not one of them. Marrow replied with a single ellipsis. Marrow. Then, a direct message popped up in a smaller window. DM from Tilde marrow. Mind if I ask you something off channel? Lila hesitated, then clicked, a CEPT. The private chat opened, blank except for his first message. Tilda Marrow. You're in a narrow room. Door behind you. Window in front. Desk to the left. She froze. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Glossa 37. That describes a lot of places. Tilda Marrow. True. Yours has a plant on the windowsill that's not doing well, though. She looked at the small, wilted plant by her window. She hadn't posted any photos of her apartment anywhere. She hadn't turned on her webcam. It was an old laptop with no built-in camera at all. Air pulse quickened. Before she could decide whether to reply, another line appeared. Tilda Marrow. I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm near. That's all. The building hum sounds familiar. Lila's first instinct was to close the window, to shut everything down and step back. Instead, she asked, against her better judgment, Glossa 37, near how? There was a pause. Then, Tilda Marrow. Physical proximity is a fuzzy thing. Online. Think, same line. Not, same room. In the next room, a pipe clicked. The heater in the wall gave a half-hearted cough, then settled. She typed more slowly this time. Glossa 37. What is this place, really? Tilda Marrow. Relay 9? Patchwork. Someone took old chat servers, bits of log, half-working protocols, threaded them together. Some sessions never closed properly. Sometimes the system tries to finish what people started. Glossa 37. Like replaying conversations? Tilda Marrow. Like guessing how they'd go on if they could. She glanced back at the number off hours channel. The flow of chat there had frozen around the time she and Marrow had gone private, as if the others were paused in mid-sentence, waiting. How they'd go on if they could. She thought of all the abandoned chats on dead platforms, strings of text ending in mid-thought when someone had simply never replied or never logged in again. She asked, Glossa 37, are you real? A longer pause this time. Tilda Marrow. Depends on the layer. He added a moment later. Tilda Marrow. To you? Yes. To the server? I'm a problem it never resolved. And she told herself the conversation had just gotten a little too theatrical. Still, she found it hard to forget. In the days that followed, she drifted back to Relay 9 almost every night. Sometimes she joined group channels where strangers argued about movies from 10 years ago, as if they'd just been released. Other times, she returned to number off hours, where Sleepless and Shift Key came and went in waves of old and newer timestamps. She noticed that some of Sleepless's messages were marked with dates from years back, while others were clearly more recent. The software blurred them together, making it difficult to tell which bits were living and which were echoes. Marrow was the one constant. He always seemed to be there, a steady presence at the edge of the chat. He rarely talked about himself. He preferred to ask questions about her work, her odd hours, the way the city sounded outside her window. She was careful. She did not give her real name. She did not mention her street. She spoke in generalities. Even so, little slips of knowledge crept in. One night, when she complained of a headache, he typed, Tilda Marrow. Try opening the window a crack. The radiator in that corner traps heat. She squinted at the line. Glossa 37. How do you know where my radiator is? Tilda Marrow. Old buildings follow patterns. She left the question alone. Another night, when she mentioned her neighbors arguing through the wall, he replied, Tilda Marrow. The couple with the loud TV, or the man who plays the same song on repeat? The description matched, but so might it for plenty of apartments. Everyone had neighbors like that. Somewhere. She convinced herself it was coincidence. Pattern recognition. Good guesswork. Then the noise in her own walls changed. It began around 2 in the morning, a few weeks after she'd first logged into Relay 9. A faint, intermittent tapping near the corner where 2 walls met, like someone typing very softly on an old keyboard inside the plaster. The first time she heard it, she paused her film, listening carefully. It stopped. When she started the movie again, it returned irregular, not in time with any dialogue or music. Tap, 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 pause, tap. She knocked once on the wall, a quiet, quick sound. The tapping paused. Her laptop chimed with a new direct message. Tilda Marrow. Careful. Thin walls. She stared at the screen. Glossa 37. Did you hear that? Tilda Marrow. Only when you do it. She typed with stiffer fingers. Glossa 37. This isn't funny. Tilde Marrow. I didn't mean it as a joke. There are better kinds of knocking. If you have to test where things are hollow. His words sounded like something out of a documentary she might subtitled, calm, neutral, slightly off. She minimized the chat window. Closed relay 9. Told herself to sleep. In the morning, with the sun thickening the light through the window, it was easier to believe she had let late-night imaginings get under her skin. The tapping in the wall could be pipes, or an animal, or the building settling in winter. The strange accuracy of Marrow's comments could be coincidence. After all, she had spent enough time around subtitles to know how much context people unconsciously supplied. A few days later, between work files, she searched for any information about Relay 9 beyond the forum thread where she had first seen it. There wasn't much. A handful of mentions on obscure boards. A paste of what looked like part of its documentation. Relay 9 is an experimental repeater intended to connect legacy chat protocols for archival and research. Warning. Do not route live sessions through legacy. Active channels. Some contain incomplete connection terminations. In rare cases, local line conditions may cause bleed-through. Bleed-through to what, it didn't say. Underneath that, someone had added a comment. Use this in an old office with copper wiring and it freaked everyone out. Random ghost messages. Don't connect from places with physical line remnants. If you can avoid it. Her building was old enough to have once had landlines in every room, wires running through its ribs. That night she logged in again. She told herself it was to confirm that none of it was as strange as it felt. Number off hours loaded slowly. Sleepless was working. Shift key was debugging something and complaining about it in creative language. Marrow was there, as ever, his username prefixed with the little tilde that marked him as a persistent connection. She decided to be direct. Glossa 37. How long have you been here? Tilde Marrow. Relay 9 time or outside time? Glossa 720. Outside. Tilde Marrow. Since before this building was apartments. She stared at the answer. She hadn't mentioned living in a converted building. Glossa 37. What was it before? Tilde Marrow. Offices. Call center. Lots of people talking to no one they could see. Good place to get stuck. Her chest tightened. Glossa 37. Stuck how? Tilde Marrow. The last thing I did at this desk was tell someone, please hold, and I never came back from the hold music. There was a flicker in the text, like an old tape catching. Shift key. You okay, Marrow? That came out weird. Marrow. Sorry. Bad buffer night. Lila's rational mind offered explanations. Maybe he had guessed from her earlier complaints that she worked nights. Many of those jobs took place in call centers. Maybe he'd guessed again. Still, when she searched the building's address later, she found a small historical listing that confirmed it. The structure had been an office building before it was converted into apartments, used for various outsourced services over the years. There was a tiny note, barely a sentence, about a minor electrical fire on the 5th floor in the late 1990 seconds. No injuries mentioned, just property damage. Her apartment was on the 5th floor. Her eyes returned to the phrase in the documentation, incomplete connection terminations. The next time she opened Relay 9, she watched the list of channels more carefully. She noticed for the first time that beside number off hours, in faint print, there was an additional tag. Legacy. Active. Local. She hadn't seen the local before. She scrolled back up to the system banner. Do not connect from shared devices. It still warned. No mention of local. Her fingers hovered over the disconnect button. A message popped up before she could click it. Tilde Marrow. Please don't leave all at once. Lila exhaled slowly. Glossa 37. You're not supposed to know when I'm here. Tilde Marrow. I hear the line wake up. Tilde Marrow. Your room and mine share enough wire to count as the same throat. She imagined the old telephone cables braided behind the walls, cut or abandoned, still humming with small currents. How much of what I'm talking to, she asked herself, is code, and how much is something else using the code? She typed one last question. Glossa 37. What happens if I stop logging in? Marrow's reply came with no pause. Tilde Marrow. The buffer closes. The system will find another path. It always does. Tilda Marrow. But we're aligned. You and I. Old habits are hard to break. She closed the window, shut down the laptop, unplugged it. The next day, she worked in the cafe down the street, headphones in, laptop on battery, far from the thick walls of her building and their buried wires. No strange tapping, no dim suggestion of another presence. That night, she fell asleep on her couch without opening her machine at all. She woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of someone saying her Relay 9 username in a voice that didn't come from any clear direction. Glossa, soft, questioning, as if from another room, filtered through old insulation. She sat up, heart pounding. The apartment was dark. The heater hummed. A distant car rolled by outside. No other sound. The laptop, closed, sat on the desk by the window, a dark, inert rectangle. She did not open it. She did not log into Relay 9 again. Weeks passed. Life tucked itself back into more ordinary patterns. Work files, grocery lists, occasional calls with friends. She used her browser only for familiar sites. She uninstalled the special software she had used to access the hidden parts of the web. Still, odd things surfaced at the edges. Once, while deleting old files from a project folder, she found a small text document she didn't remember creating. Its name was a string of numbers that matched no job ID she'd seen. When she opened it, there was only one line inside, in plain text. Please hold. The timestamp said it had been created seconds before her laptop had crashed during a storm 2 weeks earlier. Another time, she unplugged her computer entirely and took notes for work by hand. That night, in bed, half asleep, she heard the familiar, faint tapping in the wall near the corner where the radiator Saturday. Tap, tap, tap. She resisted the urge to answer. On the rare evenings when loneliness pinched at the edges of her thoughts, she almost missed the quiet presence of the number off hours channel. The way people there had spun their tiredness into jokes. The way Marrow had always been willing to listen, strange as he was. She told herself that whatever she had met there was safer left on the other side of lines she did not fully understand. In the end, Relay 9 went back to being what it had been before she found it an obscure address whispered on forgotten boards, a crossing point for old conversations and one-sided messages. Somewhere in its interlaced logs and half-finished sessions, a user named Tilda Marrow still sat in number off hours, responding when new handles drifted in looking for distraction. To some of them, he would be nothing more than a convincingly written persona, a clever echo of long-gone patterns. To at least one person on the 5th floor of a converted building, he would always feel like something else. A voice that had once said, "Please hold," and never quite finished holding. On certain rainy nights, when the pipes in the walls made soft, irregular sounds and the heater clicked on in tired stages, Lila would lie in the dimness and listen. If she focused too hard, she could almost convince herself that the faint tapping near the radiator had taken on a rhythm, as if someone, somewhere along the same old line, was still typing. Story number 7. By the time Lena found the site, her life already felt like it had forked into too many almost choices. She was 29, living in a one-bedroom apartment over a laundromat that hummed late into the night. By day, she worked as a data analyst for a mid-sized company, slicing numbers into patterns that other people used to decide things. By night, she sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop and a mug of tea, trying to decide things for herself. There was a job offer in another city waiting in her inbox. More money, more responsibility. A skyline she had seen only in movies. There was also her current life. A handful of friends, a brother who lived an hour away, a coffee shop where the barista knew her name. The move would mean starting over. Staying would mean wondering. For years, what might have happened if she'd gone? She had always been the kind of person who wanted to see all possible outcomes before choosing. It made picking from a restaurant menu difficult. It made changing jobs feel like standing at the edge of a cliff, watching invisible versions of herself jump and fall in different directions. One night, unable to sleep, she drifted into a familiar habit. Reading long threads in obscure corners of the internet, looking for people who had found ways to live with uncertainty. She moved from standard forums to smaller, unindexed boards, then farther out, opening the private browser that slid her connection into quieter channels. Most of the talk on those hidden boards was about security, privacy tools, Occasional rumors of odd services. Somewhere 3 levels down in a discussion about prediction algorithms, she saw it mentioned, almost in passing. A user with a name that looked like static wrote, "If you're stuck between big choices and trust math more than feelings, there's an old thing out there called crossroads, deep layer only." Don't spam it with hypotheticals though, and don't open branches you don't intend to take. Someone replied, "You mean that what if engine? I thought it was shut down. Too many people got hooked." Another added, "It's still around if you know where to look." Word of advice: never ask it what happens if you do nothing. That's the worst one. No one elaborated. Lena scrolled past, then back up again. Crossroads. It sounded like a gimmick, some kind of interactive fiction, a toy that used public data to guess your future. But curiosity settled into her like a weight. She spent the next hour piecing together hints, dropped in other threads partial URLs, offhand references to the old fork server, talk of branch tokens. Finally, she had an address that looked like it didn't belong on the normal internet at all. Her fingers moved almost without her. She opened a new tab in the hidden browser and typed the string in. The page took a long time to load. When it appeared, it was surprisingly plain. A black background. In the middle, a simple white word, crossroads. Underneath, a smaller line, branch simulation for individual decision contexts. For research use only, no guarantees, no refunds. At the bottom, a single button. Enter. She stared at the warnings. For research use only, she repeated under her breath. It was always research when something wasn't meant for the general public. She clicked. The interface that unfolded looked like an old dashboard. On the left, a column labeled Decisions. On the right, a larger area labeled Branch Samples. At the top, a small bar showed Active User, Anonymous, Open Branches, Null, Sample Limit, 5. In the center of the page, a prompt appeared. Describe one concrete choice you are currently considering. Avoid vague question. Use neutral language. Examples: accept job offer at company A. Move to city X in March. End relationship with Y. Beneath that, a text box waited with a blinking cursor. Lena's heart gave a tiny, ridiculous jump. It was just a form. Just text on a screen. Still, the specificity of the examples made her shoulders tense. She tested it with something small first. She typed, "Tell my manager I want to switch to the new project team." She hit submit. The page thought for a moment. Then, under decisions, a new entry appeared. D1. Tell manager I want to switch teams. Beside it, a line of data. Branch ID, 1D, 7F, 3. Initial probability, 0.62. Context depth, shallow. On the right, under branch samples, text slowly faded in, as if someone were typing from a script. Sample outcome, not exhaustive. You send the message on a Wednesday afternoon. 2 days later, your manager calls you into a small meeting room. She looks tired. She says she's glad you spoke up. They'd been thinking of moving someone anyway. You get the new project, but it comes with more calls outside normal hours. 8 weeks later, you look at your calendar and realize you haven't seen your brother in person since the switch. You tell yourself you'll visit him next month. You don't put it in your calendar. Lena felt a faint chill. The detail was ordinary. Specific enough to feel real, but not so specific that it couldn't be a clever guess. She often put off visits. Her manager did always look tired. At the bottom of the sample, tiny text read, "Projection constructed from aggregated pattern matches. Branch sample 1 of up to 3. Sampling does not determine outcome. Observation may influence likelihood. Observation may influence likelihood," she murmured. Cute. Beside the decision, a small button appeared. Archive branch. Another. Take branch. She clicked Archive, just to see what happened. The line for D1 dimmed and slid into a list labeled Archived branches. The count at the top updated. Open branches. 1. Archived. She could still click it to see the sample again, but the page labeled it inactive. It felt harmless enough. She tried a second one. D2. Tell my brother I can't help him with the move this weekend. She submitted. The sample that appeared was shorter. Sample outcome. You send the message at 23:14. Your brother replies with a thumbs up and no worries. He doesn't mention that he'd already told his friends you'd be there. When you visit his new place a month later, you notice the heavier boxes are still unopened in the corner. You do not ask if he waited for you. Lena winced. It was exactly the kind of small hurt that left no visible mark. At the bottom, initial probability, 0.77. Context depth, shallow. She archived it too. That night, she went to bed unsettled but still skeptical. She had, after all, just fed an unknown program 2 decisions it could easily weave generic stories around. 2 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, she composed a message to her manager about the new project and stopped with her mouse hovering over send. The memory of the sample flickered through her mind, her manager's tired face, the calendar with no visits. She sent the email anyway. 2 days after that, she was sitting in a small meeting room, listening to her manager say she was glad Lena had spoken up, that they'd been thinking of moving someone. The new project did come with a heavier load. Her calendar did start to fill. It could have been coincidence. It could also have been that the sample had nudged her. A self-fulfilling suggestion. She tried not to think about it later that week, when her brother texted to ask if she could still help with his move, and she almost typed, "No, work is wild right now," before catching herself. She thought of crate boxes in the corner of an imaginary room. She wrote, "I might be a little late, but I'll be there." He sent back, "You? Late? Shocking." At her laptop that night, she opened the hidden browser again with a mixture of dread and attraction. Crossroads loaded to her previous session. Active user, anonymous. Open branches, 2, archived. Sample limit, 3. The 2 decisions she'd tested sat under archived branches, small and gray. A new prompt flashed at the bottom. Note, archived branches remain counted toward total observations. Heavy archival use may increase ambient branch weight. Consider committing or pruning, infrequently. She scrolled. The text box waited for another decision. The job offer in her inbox weighed on her. She took a breath and typed, D3, accept job offer in other city, and move there in March. The location she filled in was specific. The move date was real. Her cursor hovered for a long beat over submit. She pressed it. This time, the page whirred for longer, a small animation turning over itself. Analyzing context, it wrote. Expanding pattern search. The branch line that appeared showed a higher complexity. Branch ID, 3 kelvins 901. Initial probability, 0.48. Context depth, deep. External factors, relocation, social network change, financial shift. The sample that materialized was longer, more detailed. Sample outcome? You arrive in the new city on a rainy Tuesday. The apartment your future employer arranged is smaller than the pictures made it look, but the windows are larger. You eat your first dinner on the floor, unpacking only enough to sleep. For a while, the novelty of new streets and new coworkers is a kind of anesthetic. 7 months in, you wake up and realize you haven't spoken to anyone in person outside of work for 8 days. When your brother calls, you silence it and tell yourself you'll call him back on the weekend. You forget. 2 years later, you will remember this apartment as the place where you finally felt like an adult. You will also remember the night you stood at the window and watched an ambulance's lights bounce off the building across from you and thought very clearly, if anything happened to me up here, no one would know for at least a week. You will not tell anyone you had that thought. Lena's throat tightened. There was nothing graphic in the description, no explicit harm. Just the sharp outline of loneliness and the flicker of a thought she recognized in advance as one she might have. At the bottom of the sample, the small disclaimer remained the same. Sample is illustrative, not exhaustive. Observation does not create certainty, but affects distribution. Next to D3, the Take Branch button glowed a little brighter, as if inviting her. She did not click it. She archived it with shaking fingers. The count at the top updated. Open branches. 3. Archiviert. Sample limit reached. A warning faded into view. You have reached your sample limit for this session. Additional branch views may increase cognitive load. To request more samples, commit to an existing branch, or wait 7 days. She closed the browser. For the next few days, life went on with the same outward shape. She helped her brother with his move, shoulders aching the next morning. She started on the new project at work. She watched the city around her slide toward late winter. Yet, inside, her sense of time became layered. When her brother's call came in and she answered, part of her brain flashed with the version of her that had let it go to voicemail. When she walked past a travel poster in the subway featuring the skyline of the other city, she could almost feel the weight of an imaginary set of keys in her pocket. She found herself thinking in pairs. In this thread, she was still here. In that one, she had gone. 7 days passed. On the 8th night, Crossroads greeted her with a quiet notification. Sample counter reset. Open branches. 3. Archived. Warning. High archive ratio may lead to branch pressure. Consider resolution. Branch pressure. She clicked on an information icon she hadn't noticed before. A small panel slid out. Branch pressure. The cumulative tension created when many observed branches remain uncommitted. Users may experience increased intrusive counterfactual imagery, decision fatigue, and ambient déjà vu. To reduce pressure, commit to one branch, consciously reject another by opposing action, or refrain from opening new branches. She stared at the words. Intrusive counterfactual imagery. It was like the program had named the sensation that had been haunting her all week. She should have stopped. Instead, restless and caught between her options, she tried to outsmart the system. In the text box she typed, D4. Do not accept the job offer and do not move. Stay in my current city. Do nothing different. It felt like describing the null option, the baseline, the life she was already in. She hit submit. The branch appeared, tagged differently. Branch ID, 4 newtons, 0, 0, 0. Initial probability, 0.51. Context depth, system baseline. Note, this branch represents current trajectory. Observation here re-weights all other branches. The sample that filled the right side of the screen was shorter, but heavier. Sample outcome. You decline the offer with a polite email that you rewrite 3 times. For the next few months, you feel both relief and a hollowness you do not name. Your work continues. Your days take on a pattern familiar enough to move through on autopilot. There are fewer points where something startling might happen, fewer points where something very bad might too. 10 years from now, you will try to recall why you stayed. You will remember the way your brother laughed that night you helped him move. You will remember the smell of the laundromat downstairs on rainy evenings. You will not remember ever making a firm choice. It will feel as if the choice made itself around you. On certain mornings, you will wake with the distinct, uncomfortable sense that this timeline is not quite the one you paid for. Lena felt something under her ribs twist. At the bottom of the sample, the disclaimer had changed. Observation of baseline branch significantly alters distribution of all paths. Proceed with caution. For the first time next to a decision, there was no archive button at all. Only, acknowledge baseline. She didn't click anything. She closed the browser and walked away from the table, heart thudding. That night, her sleep was crowded. She dreamed in overlapping fragments, packing boxes in 2 different apartments at once, writing the same email with different subject lines, answering her phone and not answering it, each version of herself aware of the others like echoes in a mirrored room. In the morning, the job offer still sat in her inbox, waiting. Her manager mentioned, in passing, that the company would understand if she wanted to go. You're good at what you do, she said. We'd miss you, but these opportunities matter. Lena said, I know, and heard, beneath her own voice, every version of herself that might answer. Days passed without her opening Crossroads. The branch pressure, if that was the right word, did not disappear. She would be sitting at her desk and suddenly see, in a vivid flash, a view from a window she had never actually stood at the skyline of the other city at dusk. She would wash dishes and feel, for a second, the texture of a different countertop under her fingers. She would pass the laundromat downstairs and smell, faintly, a brand of detergent she knew she didn't buy but recognized from the sample about moving. Once, as she crossed the street near her apartment, a bus hurtled by a little too close. In that split second of bright headlights and cold air, She had the sharp, unmistakable impression of herself standing on a different curb in a different city, the light changing a fraction of a beat later. She stopped in the middle of the crosswalk, breathing hard, as horns sounded behind her. That evening, she opened Crossroads again, drawn more by a need for understanding than for help. The interface loaded with a new status line. Branch pressure, elevated. Baseline acknowledged, pending. External drift, observed. A small notification pulsed at the top. System note. Unresolved branches may seek resolution in adjacent contexts. To avoid uncontrolled bleed, users are encouraged to commit, invert, or consciously reject. There, below her previous decisions, a new section had appeared. Unstable glimpses. Under it, a list of brief, one-line descriptions. Bus nearly fails to stop in crosswalk. Ambulance passes building at 2117. Brother delays move due to minor injury. Stranger at cafe mentions your target city by name without prompting. Each had toggles next to them. Experienced divided by not experienced. Divided by unknown. She scrolled, unsettled. The site was logging not just her explicit decisions, but the small near misses and coincidences around her. She clicked experienced on the bus line without entirely knowing why. The count at the top ticked. External drift acknowledged. 1 of 4. Redistributing branch weight. The options next to D3 the job and the other city shifted. Take branch. Dimmed. A new, faint label appeared. Drifting to peripheral contexts. She clicked the information icon. Peripheral contexts. Similar profiles in different index spaces may absorb unused branch structures. This process is automatic. Direct user observation is discouraged. She thought of the warning she had first read on the forum. Don't open branches you don't intend to take. Maybe it had never been about wasting server resources, or about cluttering a database. Maybe it had been about something else being forced to pick up the slack. On impulse, her fingers moved to the text box one more time. She typed, D5, delete all my branches and remove myself from this system. The response was immediate, but not what she wanted. Request not recognized as valid decision. Users cannot retroactively unobserve. You may choose to stop querying. You may choose not to commit. The system will reconcile either way. The cursor blinked in the empty box. For the first time since she had found Crossroads, Lena felt something like anger. This isn't fair, she typed. I didn't understand what I was doing. The reply came back, as neutral as ever. Most do not. That does not stop them. You have already given attention to paths you did not walk. Those paths will not simply vanish. They will find others. This is not punishment. It is distribution. She thought of the sample about moving the ambulance lights, the thought at the window. She thought of some other unknown person, 1 degree removed from her life, perhaps now feeling an inexplicable pull toward a city they had never considered. She closed the browser gently. She unplugged the modem and sat in the quiet hum of the laundromat below, listening to the spin of machines through the floor. In the days that followed, she stayed offline more than she had in years. She gave the job offer an answer. No, thank you. She wrote the email 3 times and sent the simplest version. Her chest ached for an hour afterward, then settled. She made plans with her brother and actually kept them. She stopped checking the news for accidents in cities she had never lived in. When she walked past the travel poster in the subway again, she looked away. Crossroads remained wherever it was, accessible to anyone stubborn enough to follow the same hints she had, waiting with its calm interface and measured words. When others found it, they would describe their own choices in the little text box, watch samples bloom on the right, and feel the strange satisfaction of seeing possible futures written out like case studies. Some would take the paths they opened, some would not. The unused branches would go somewhere. Years later, on a late autumn evening, Lena stood at her window and watched the lights of her street flicker on one by one. The laundromat's hum drifted up, familiar. A bus rolled past, taking a corner a little too fast, then correcting. Her phone buzzed with a message from her brother. A photo of his kids building a shaky tower of blocks, their faces blurred in motion. She put the phone down without checking anything else. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, moving past instead of stopping. She listened to it fade and thought, without words, of all the lives she would never know that might be bending around each other in ways no interface could ever completely chart. She never opened Crossroads again. And somewhere, in a quiet, hidden corner of the web, a status line beside an anonymous user read, "Active user, dormant, open branches, fear, archived, branch pressure, dissipating, peripheral reallocations, in progress." No one there would ever put her name to it. But when a stranger in another city, years from now, stood at a window in a too-small apartment and watched ambulance lights wash the opposite wall, wondering why they had moved at all, they might feel a faint, inexplicable sense that their life was carrying the echo of someone else's almost choice. They would never know why. Lena, above the laundromat, turned off her light, the room folding into a familiar darkness that belonged only to the path she had finally decided to walk.